auditor. So welcome, Mr. Tan. I'll stop sharing the screen and you may start sharing your screen. Thank you so much. Please take the floor. Mr. Tan, are you able to share the screen?
Hello, Dr. Kamal, can you hear me and see my screen?
Yeah, see your screen, I think.
I'm not sure about my others, but I can't see your screen at the moment. But
you can't see my screen.
I beg to differ. Maybe somebody else can see. Yeah,
Yeah.
Dr. Julia, can you see?
Yes.
Now
yes.
I can see. Yeah, perfect.
Oh, you can see the screen now.
Yes, now I can see.
A very good morning and Happy New Year to all of you. Today I will be presenting the topic of effective detection of incidents of TIP, trafficking in person in social audit with case studies. Okay. As far of this training presented, our main objective is to ensure stakeholder mainly focus to agency companies or government bodies, company representative or internal auditor who are often unfamiliar with the indicator of forced labor and skill in detection of TIP. So therefore, the objective of the training is to share social auditor experience and our skill in detection of incidents of TIP. The method of this training is we would like to present 4 case studies from different countries, which is related to forced labor and which is also categorized in TIP. We will use the case study to identify what are the signs of forced labor and what auditors or company representative can do to detect the TIP. I'm not sure those participants who attend this training are from auditor firm, from company that are representing to be responsible for the social compliance audit. But then the whole objective, in my personal opinion, is to ensure we create awareness to detect TIP in our working environment. This is very important to let the public know. A social audit is not to punish any parties, the company, the workers, or other stakeholder within the working environment. The objective of the learning is to make sure we have the skill or the knowledge to detect what could be resulting in forced labor in our working environment. So we hope not only the auditor will join the training, but also the company representative will learn a little bit more from the training and from the sharing of the auditor in detecting the TIP in social audit. Okay, a very quick run through on what is TIP. TIP is referring to trafficking in person. Okay, and in layman, we always know this as human trafficking or human right abuse. Okay, the form of TIP could be in forced labor, sex trafficking, and child soldiering. Today, we are focusing on the forced labor because we are doing this training, excuse me, to focus on the how social audit can help the company to identify forced labor. Okay, according to ILO, Forced Labor Convention 1930, Article 29, forced or compulsory labor is all work or service which is accepted from any person under the threat of a penalty and for which the person has not offered himself or herself voluntary. Okay, so the word voluntary is very important. Okay, forced labor is our today topics. Is violation of human right in recruitment and employment can be detected in social audit. So the focus of this violation are, normally during the social audit, we are focusing on the key indicator below. So it's a debt bondage, excessive overtime, retention of identity documents, abusing working and living condition, and slavery. Before we start the case study, I would like to share some important note. There are some exceptions to the forced labor. Okay, according to ILO Forced Labor Protocol, Article 2 and 2 of Convention of number 29, describe 5 situations where constitute exceptions to the forced labor. So the 5 exceptional case will be below. Compulsory military service is not applicable. If we have a social auditor, we don't audit to the military services because some of the requirement of their so-called working environment in military services is not complying to the requirement of a social audit. And normal civic obligation, prison labor under certain condition, work in emergency situations such as war, calamity, or threatened calamity, for example, fire, flood, okay, like recent, the first situation in our country. So people are working day and night, so this cannot apply any social requirement, okay. Minor communal services, okay, within the community. So these are considered exclusion of the forced labor social audit. Okay, let's go direct to the case study number 1, which is related to excessive forced overtime. Okay, our case study presented today is will consider 4 cases, which is a real case situation. We are taking this case from the news reading, and our first case will be focused on the excessive and forced overtime. So this is happening in USA, American. So Frito-Lay forced overtime fluctuations not limited to striking Topeka plant in USA. Okay, this article was published in the news on 2021, July 17. Okay, you can see this article here. If you Google the news, you will see a similar news appear in Google for this strike. Okay, from the update of this this reading, we have taken that some of the reports show that on forced overtime, the contract offer would guarantee worker at least 1 day off per week. Okay, it's reported in the plant, worker have their employment contract, and the employment contract have been detailed with at least 1 day off per week on either the 6 or 7 days of their work week, provided they haven't used any previous time off that week, including sick days, floating or regular holidays, or FMLA, or unpaid funeral leave. Okay, this is what the reporter write in the news. Okay, and also I would like to call for your attention in the second article where the new agreement would also eliminate the head suicide shift when workers are forced to stay. So the keywords here, they are forced to stay over an extra 4 hours after their normal 8-hour shift. So their normal working hour will be 8 hours in a day, and then forced in 4 hours early before their next shift, leaving them just 8 hours between shifts. Okay. So based on the article here, so the article is very long, but then we are taking the important contents from the article, which is updated in July 23rd of last year. Okay, so this is happened. The news was reported because there is a strike. Okay, okay. We would like to see any sign of forced labor. Let's say if you are assigned as an auditor, you want to assign to investigate the case. So we will clearly see worker does not entitled rest day if they haven't used any previous time off that week, including 6 days, floating or regular holidays. Okay, FMLA or unpaid funeral leave. FMLA is referred to the U.S. Family and Medical Leave Act. Okay, I think that is the entitlement for their leave or medical leave. Another side from the article is worker time record may show workers stay extra 4 hours after their normal 8-hour shift and may show worker in 4 hours early before the next shift. Do you think this sound familiar with what happening in your organization or the organization that you hear before? Worker have to come for work under some pressure of productions or operation, and sometimes worker, well, I'm not sure how do you identify forced to stay after their normal 8 hours, or they have to come back to work earlier before their reporting time of the work on the next day. Okay, so however, this definitely will resulting some potential forced labor, because workers are forced to do extra work, and this happened even in US. If this happened in developing country like Malaysia and some other like China, India, it may be see with familiar, but then in US they even have the problem of forced overtime or excessive overtime. So how should we, as an auditor or as an investigator, to identify whether this incident is a valid incident, or that is really contributing the excessive overtime? Many auditors will have to report the incident, but then how to detect it as a sign of TIP? So we are recommending conduct due diligence against the employment contract and the actual time records to check if worker deceive about content or legality of work contract. Okay, this is very important for document review. Forced overtime normally is very it's not easy to detect from the interview with the worker or interview with the management staff or the for the operation of the productions. But then if we really look into the employment contract, we will know what is the actual working hour stipulated in the contract, and the actual time record through the punch card or the biometric system of the worker records. It is very important to understand in the local law what is the standard working hour in a contract, and whether the contract is complying to the local law, and then is there any special acceptance or application to the authority or some agreement under collective bargaining or collective agreement with the union, if the company have a union to lay out what are the overtimes or the standard working hour. Some organization may have a longer working hour, which is accepted by the authority to arrange in a manner that they may have a longer working hour, but then they have more rest day compared to others. This happened in like oil and gas industry, where they have to report to work on and also standby basis in offshore, but then they will have maybe one week off after the 2 weeks working in the offshore. So that's why we do not make assumption of excessive overtime, rather than we have conducted a due diligence audit against the employment contract and the actual time record. So we also would actually interview with the accountable person to find out if the employer is not respecting labor law and contract sign. So this is very important. Signing a contract and what is actually practicing is very much different sometimes, because contract is to some management is to just to presenting what are the wages, and And they thought like after signing the contract, they have a full authority to arrange the worker work according to what they design in their system. But however, the employer need to respect the contract. Where time record not available to show working hour, verify against salary transaction, phone application, phone apps that trace location and time, or auditor can check CCTV records. Okay, this is some recommendation in a worst scenario. During the audit, if the person, the investigator, do not have any record to check the worker working hours, so sometimes auditor have to audit the other different method where salary transaction will show the basic salary indicating they are working on standard working hour, and then the extra money may show some how much working hour extra overtime they have been worked. Sometimes if workers are not paying for overtime premium, we can also check from their phone application like the Google Maps or some social application where it indicating how much time a person stay in a location. There could be also some important indication that the worker have been in the same location, for example, in their workplace for more than 12 hours in a day. Okay, and of course, auditor could also run through the CCTV record to show that a specific group of worker, how much time they have been staying in the at the site during the working hours. Okay, so this is an example of the so-called extensive and forced overtime in our audit, where we can really look into it and we can find out some information on what is the area that we can cover during when we check the extensive or forced overtime. Before I go for the next case study, I would like to open if there are any question that anyone would like to ask in terms of the first case study. Savita, can you help to check any question from the chat?
No, sir, there are no questions at the moment.
If there's
There
no
were
question,
actually, so sorry, there were a couple of questions at the very beginning, but
okay.
yeah, you should see if you would like to address them first.
Yeah, maybe let's answer the question before we continue with the second case study.
Yeah, morning, Mr. Tan.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah,
Mr.
can I
Ahmad.
ask a question?
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm being posed by my members on this question.
Yeah.
You see, in a unionized situation,
Yeah.
the union
If
leader.
the company have a union, yeah.
This is a theoretical question. In a unionized situation, the union leader may demand that the company allow the workers to work beyond what is allowed by the law, which is 8 hours full-time and 4 hours overtime.
Yeah.
And should their demand also they work 7 days a week, right? So now
Yeah.
So now, how do we solve this problem? Because on one hand, we have to listen to what the union requested for. On the other hand, we have to comply to the law. And where does this end actually? Where is the line? The fine line?
Okay, this is a good question. In Malaysia, we do have a Trade Union Act. This is also another act that companies should observe. Where if an organization have a union, there should have a collective bargaining with the union, and it's not like what the union demand that will come to the enforcement. Let's say the union are demanding on a certain working hour of certain shift. For example, maybe the shift, the day shift and the night shift arrangement. If a a little bit different, or maybe compared to the what required in the law. It is acceptable if the collective agreement have been agreed by both parties, and then the union are representing the collective agreement. I mean, the majority of the worker. So that will be written in the collective agreement. And if the collective agreement have been signed and recognized by the union, that will be acceptable, because the collective agreement will with details of the pay of the worker if they are willing to work extra than what is required by the law, what is accepted by the law. Then there will have a mechanism to compensate with the enough rest for the worker. Not only the amount of pay, but also the safety of the worker is identified by how much time they actually can rest before they start another shift.
What if there's no union? However,
Okay.
there is an informal leadership among the workers, and the leaders said and demanded the working hours beyond overtime.
Okay,
Let's say they want to work
that is a
40
very tricky
hours a day.
situation.
Yeah.
Okay. As auditor, we are trained to respect the collective agreement. If this is the voice of the majority of the worker, so the employer should have to show the open attitude for freedom of association, where even though there isn't any union, so there should have some collective bargaining, so-called, with the maybe a worker representative or a committee council of the worker, even though there isn't any union. But then the representative of this committee of the worker representative must show they are representing majority of the worker, and this will be put in place by the organization to invite also the labor department to involve by application to the working hour that is requested by the worker, and as a result of the negotiation with the employer. So that means if they have a good mechanism in social arrangement, the organization should have identified the committee member or the worker representative who representing the worker, even though there is not a union. This is the voice of the majority of the worker, and then this negotiation with the employer, with the arrangement of the working hour, is putting in black and white, and also support as an evidence to the application to the labor department for the arrangement of overtime or working hour that is not comply or not follow the legal requirement, and that will have to get approval from the labor department for this arrangement.
I see.
Hello.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
Can I answer the question that answer for the unionized environment?
Yeah,
Can you
please.
hear me? My name is Amarjit Singh.
Yeah, Amarjit Singh, please.
Okay. If case of union one more, it depends on the standard you're talking about. We are actually talking about Malaysia, which is under palm oil and other industries.
Yeah,
in
we
the
are talking
standard, it should be
Malaysia.
written that working hours per week shall be normal hours and shall not exceed 60 hours. But if the local law say you can exceed that, the one which benefit the worker will apply. Even the union asks that they want to increase the working hours, it's not allowed. That is forced labor. Okay. What you need to do, even the union said, even the workers say we need overtime. No. 60 hours is the one in ILO convention. You cannot go against it, whether you have a collective bargaining and all that. So it depends on which standard you're talking about. Our Malaysian standard for palm oil industry is MSPO 2530 Part 3 and Part 4. They do not say how much working hours is. That's the reason we have a lot of forced labor issue in Malaysia, or TPI issue, is because it's not clearly stated in the standards. So as I mentioned earlier in my previous talk, in social system like this labor, forced labor, decent work and all that, the organization, whether estate or company, must follow the law, must comply. We don't say follow. But in case there's a standard, we have to comply to, let's say MS 250 or RBA Code of Conduct or whatever ETI base code or even RSPO principle and criteria. If it's stated in the standard, it's 60 hours, then 60 hours apply, including overtime per week. No one can change it, even the union. Yeah, we please focus on Malaysian environment or issue, not in overseas. Like it's better that we learn from what is forced labor. As it's not stated in the standards, whether it's MSPO 2530 or in RSPO principle and criteria, that's the reason we have this issue of forced labor. So the standards must be very clear, must be very detailed. So even you have a union, there's a collective agreement, you cannot go more than 60 hours per week. That's all. Okay.
I have one further question.
Yes, you
what
can ask.
if, despite citing the law, the limits of the law, and the informal leader decided to launch a strike and the workers followed him to have a strike?
I think I'm not the presenter. The presenter should be presenting, but we have laws on that in Malaysia and trade union law and other laws that you cannot have a strike. There's a cooling period of 1 month for the employee to worker to decide to settle the problem. So I should not be presenting because I think it's better let the presenter present it. Okay.
Thank you, Amarjit Singh, for the
thank you.
For repeating that when an organization are set up in Malaysia, they of course will have to comply with the Employment Act and other relevant law. And on top of that, if they are in a specific industry like palm oil industry, of course, nowadays they have to comply with MSPO or ISPO. So if they are complying to ISPO and MSPO, there are additional requirement on top of the local law as well. So what Mr. Amarjit is telling us is correct, where in the situation of palm oil, so there is no other ways that party, even like union, can do anything about asking more OT rather than stipulated in the additional requirement. Okay, I think that is very clear. For the question like strike, okay, when there is a strike, that means there is some industry relationship issue to be resolved between the employer and also the worker. So in a situation of strike, I think many of the company have to get into the resolve of issue, maybe with the union or any worker representative party, and also sometimes they need to involve the labor department if the issue created is really huge issue. So that's why in social audit, if there is a strike, normally that it will be an investigation only involved with the auditor. Other than that, is slowly between the industry relationship and between the employer and the worker. And somehow we recommend you to also get the labor department to involve so that you have a party that neutral to resolve the issue with the worker. Are you fine with the answer from my side?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Tan, for the answers. My concern is that sometimes the strike can be very destructive to the company, as what we have seen in the case of Malaysian Airlines. And what is unfolding right now is the ports in America, whereby the union leaders, union actually do not want to cooperate with clearing the ports, and then we have many ships waiting outside at the ports.
That is a very complicated situation where they are asking to work continuously extensive working hour, because that is really is a hazard in at their work, because worker in the port have their own arrangement of their work routine, and that also have to consider about the safety of the worker. So if the situation go into the strike, it is very complicated situation where it will involve with the authority or the government institution, where in that case, less that we can do as a social auditor or management representative.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah. So any other question related to this extensive working hour, the first case study? So if there's no, let's go to the second case study. Okay, from the current side. All of you can see my screen, right? Savita, can you see my screen?
Mr. Tan, I think you need to reshare it.
Reshare. Okay, hold on.
Yeah.
You can't see my screen, right? Okay, start my video.
Yeah, we have some hiccup happening to someone requesting our participants to switch on the video. So.
Oh, okay. Can you see now? Hi, all. Can you? Oh, yeah. Can. Let's continue. Okay, my second case study is referring to modern day slave. So this is a case study I take from the Korean newspaper. Okay, we understand this news is published on 2020, 2 years ago, on October 21st. Okay, the title of this is Migrant Worker Denounce Modern Day Slavery in Korea. Okay, so let's continue, see what is the news about. Okay, this is about a fisherman, okay, a migrant fisherman from Timor-Leste who wanted to be identified only as Lopez M, and took appalling working condition and human rights violation on a small island for years. Okay, this is a real case. Okay, focus to the contents of the news. He was virtually locked up and isolated on Gallardo off the coast of Gunsan, as he was not allowed to leave without permission from his employer. Okay, he was dispatched to another workplace several times in breach of his employment contract. Okay, so the means he is not working in one location. He have to work in so many locations. I'm not sure from the statement that he have to transfer to different boss or different employee, but then from the statement, this worker have been dispatched to a few places as a working place. Okay, and this is not sure whether it's written in their employment contract. And in the same the same article, there's another worker, which is Shiva Tharu, a 40-year-old man from Nepal, also asked his employer to end his employment. So that means he want to leave his employer. Okay, he have to give his boss 500,000 won and was finally sent free from the contract with a clothing factory. He now works at a metal factory. So that means a worker, when he have to leave his employment, he have to pay money to leave the employment. So this is I'm not sure this happened in Malaysia or not, but it shows that some sign of forced labor from the news that we are reading. Okay, what are the signs of the forced labor from the news we are reading here? Bad living condition and no channel to contact with outsiders show worker is controlled or isolated within the workplace. Okay, worker has no money, no communication device, and no access to his own money. Let's say, if the worker has no money, no communication devices, or no access to his own money, which is access to the ATM machine or bank, indicating also sign of forced labor. Worker not provided with permanent accommodation might be a sign of transfer to various workplace. Okay, worker transferring money to employer or deduction from wages showing sign of slavery. Okay, from the news, we may not have many information, much information about the detail of the working condition reported to these two migrant workers. But then as an auditor or as an investigator into this case, we will see if the site that we are talking about just now, like the bad living condition, no money, no communication devices, that means their handphone is restricted to be used, they don't have a SIM card to communicate, okay? And if they are not provided with a permanent accommodations at the workplace, and workers have to transfer the money, have to pay the employer to end their employment, these are all signs of forced labor. Okay, how should we detect forced labor in this situation? Okay, on-site verification is very important, where auditor or investigator shall present at the workplace to check condition at worker accommodation for freedom of movement, whether workers are free to move around during non-working hour, or accessibility to public or local authority. If they have any problem with their work, can they go out and ask for help or not? Can they go to report in the local authority like police station or labor department? Okay, auditor or investigation can check security control of the site, including the worker accommodation, security, and CCTV. Okay, that's why it's very important to perform on-site audit in this situation where auditor or investigator, we can check what is the security status. Are the security at the site or at the worker accommodation is to control the movement of the worker, or the security is to maintain the safety of the accommodation or of the factory. Okay, and review employment contract. Okay, auditor or investigator shall review employment contract for working location, wages, whether they have any bond or debt based on the contract, and termination. Okay, what is the termination clause in the contract? With reasonable notice, with no monetary penalties. Okay, this is very important. Employment contract shall also detail with the exit choice, like what is the notice of termination, okay, what is the method that the party will request to terminate their employment contract. So this shall be detailed in the employment contract. So other method on detect the TIP in this case will be interview with the worker to confirm. Okay, this is a spelling error here. To confirm if the workers under constant surveillance. If yes, check if this is true. So normally when worker under control for their movement, there will not be able to raise up the issue, because even though the auditor talk with the worker, there might be people who are looking at the worker and give them threat warning not to tell too much to the auditor or the investigator. But then investigator have to understand how they live in the accommodation, how they work in the working environment, and based on the hints given by the worker, we should verify. For example, how many CCTV at the accommodation, and what is the hostel rules and regulation where they need to report at what time, they need to sleep at what time, and they cannot go up at what time, under what circumstances, what are the documents they control for their movement. So this is very important for the auditor to know and to verify. Okay, and auditor should request evidence of salary pay to worker, for example, bank transaction, to confirm whether the worker bank account is controlled by the worker. In some situation, it's very important that it happened in some organization, or even some of you are experienced in recruit a maid to be for your family. For example, when the worker arriving in the factory, so according to this procedure, they should help them to open a bank account. After open a bank account, it's very important to know whether this account is controlled by the worker. For example, so the worker will have control on their ATM card, and they know what is the account number, what is the password that is set by the worker, rather than after opening the bank account, the employer have took the ATM card, and the access to the bank account is all controlled by the employer rather than employee. This is very important. If the worker cannot show the ATM card to the auditor that confirm this bank account is controlled by the worker itself, we have some evidence to say to report in our audit that this is a sign of forced labor, and we will detect it and confirm it as a forced labor, because what the salary that the worker have worked in their entire working in time in the factory was not able to go to the hand of the worker, because the employer have control the ATM card or the account whatsoever. Okay, so this is the TIP that could possible detected in this case study. This is quite a sad story that it happened to many of the country, but not only in Korea, but maybe they have resolved this issue already, because this case is in year 2020. Okay, so now I'm open up for any question. If you are requesting to investigate this kind of situation, okay, workers are isolated in a certain area and they have been transferred from one place to another place, which is having different kind of working environment, and it may affect their pay, because a work in one location and the other location might be different, and that will also have to be identified again, whether the pay to different kind of work is fair for the worker, or it is not a kind of forced labor, or the worker have been informed that the nature of their work is to transfer from one location to another location with similar work or with a different kind of work. Okay, Savida, do we have any question from this case study? Or anyone would like to raise your question?
There are some, Mr. Tan, there are some questions in the chat. There is Mr. Sayed asking about unions. Probably, would you like me to read?
Yeah, please read it, because I don't want to turn off my screen.
Okay, so anything like that, the unions are sold for money. The workers suspect the company already bought the union. They even don't get any single facility what they're supposed to get. They do not get their job properly. They are secretly corrupt. What's your suggestion on this? I think the question is about that the unions are corrupt in most cases. They are ready to sell themselves off for money and not care for the workers.
Okay, I think this is related to the trust to the union. Therefore, it's very important that auditor, if you have grievances from the worker about they cannot trust the union, we need to look back into the mechanism of the election of union. Okay, if auditor have discover some grievances from worker during their audit or during the investigation of the audit of a situation in an organization, please go back to the to further discover what is the mechanism to elect a worker representative or the union member, so that a person that can be trusted by the worker is able to be participate in the nomination as a union member and as the worker representative.
Can I ask Mr. Tan one question?
Case by case. Yeah, please.
Can I ask one question, Mr. Tan? In case you find that you have this problem when you interview the workers, they say the leader have been bought by the management. In a certification audit, what you will do?
Oh, that is some input. Okay, it's a grievance or it's an input. It may be resulting in a complaint. Okay, so auditor have to find out more evidence based on this input. Okay, one of the the indicator that we need to know is what are the so-called corruption reported by the worker. Are they being buy off by amount of money? And we have to know what are the so-called buy off the transaction. And then is there any so-called evidence to show that?
Okay.
Normally,
Again,
this is a social audit, and they may not have so much time provided by the auditor to focus on one issue. But then we can record down of the worker grievances.
okay.
Yes.
In case of, are we talking about certification audit or what audit we are talking about now?
Social audit, normally we don't have certification audit. It's just an assessment because we don't issue certificate. Let's say this is a social audit because our today topic is use a social audit case study to present this training. So very much we will put ourselves into a social audit situation.
Okay, coming back to this social audit, there are two kinds. One is for certification, let's say SA 8000.
Yeah, SA 8000 we have certificate.
That's a social
other
audit.
than that,
also in RSPO, because we are talking about palm oil social audit, then we call by MSPO, there's a social audit fund there. Then maybe this, or the other one you're talking about is based on RBA code of conduct or other standards,
a pure social audit
requirement or whatever. So that usually we issue reports, we don't issue certificates. So there, I think here we are talking both lah. No, we cannot talk one. I think
in general,
focus on both.
So that's why even though a certification audit or a social assessment we call, the agenda is normally pre-arranged in our audit plan, and we don't investigate a situation with full capacity for the auditor. So if the concern is really a grievance or a major issue, auditor shall report it in our report. And if a concern is being taking the attention from the board, so there will be investigation to be carried on for a particular major issue identified during the audit. So I don't think during the audit, auditor will spend too much time to investigate in one grievances from the worker. But then auditor for sure they will mark the attention from the worker and then further investigate through the document review or a verification with other observation. Okay. I mean, this will be the common practice by the social auditor if they detect the situation in a routine audit. But if the audit is only to investigate the case, like what we're sharing now, then we will have a lot of time to investigate the issue from the social perspective of it. Any other question?
Yeah, there are some in the chat. So I don't think we've had this question before. Do you think, but feel free to disregard this, Mr. Tan, if it's beyond your purview. Would it be restrictive to control the movement of workers with CCTV installed or security guards in their hostel they're staying? Would it be considered restrictive?
Every landlord or the organization have their right to install CCTV for the reason of security. Okay, in the social requirement, we are not supposed to control the movement of the worker. CCTV shall only be used for security reason or for safety reason as a tools to ensure workers are safe and secure at their workplace and in their accommodation. So it is very important to draw the line whether the purpose of that CCTV, for example, if you install a CCTV at the security guard house just to monitor the entrance of the worker, and then the transport, the vehicle come in with the correct security procedure, yes, I think that would be fair enough. But if you install a CCTV at the rest area or at the toilet, at the restroom, that is a very questionable so-called location. That why you want to install the CCTV at that at the restroom at the rest area. Okay, so it's very subjective, and it shall be bring into the discussion and for the auditor to discuss and bring the attention to the management and ask the management why you want to install a CCTV in this location, in that location, if there is a concern from the worker. We will also,
yeah, Mr. Tan, I'd like to check on this case. This is a genuine case. One of our member, they have this conflicting requests from two different US government agencies.
Okay.
Yeah, one is, of course, from a security perspective, they expect that security to be enhanced.
Okay.
So
for example, in warehouse or in...
yes, warehouse. Yeah. The key concern is that the worry is that after September 11, there may be some people purposely breach the security and then put in a bomb or something else that can threaten the homeland security of America. Hence, they requested that security on the perimeter to be tightened such that there are watchtowers.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Along the perimeters. Imagine that
this is customer requirement. Yeah.
Yes. The place would become like a prison. Yeah. Because of all the watchtowers. And on the other hand, on the other hand, in terms of human rights, you are not supposed to have such thing, right? So now, when it comes to auditing and even social compliance, who should we follow? Yeah, because it's two conflicting requirements from the same country by two different agencies. Appreciate your enlightenment on this. Thank you.
Yeah, from my point of view as an auditor, when a customer requirement imposed to the company, like because the Homeland Security Act or something like that, we want all our supplier to have a strictened and a systematic security enhancement to ensure our product is safe and is not, used by terrorism to attack. Okay. So that kind of enhancement of security will be systematic, and they are drawn in very clear-cut manner. Okay, for example, every entrance you must have a CCTV. Okay, so that requirement usually will not have problem with social audit because it is only focused on the security of the goods or the movement of the goods. Okay. But then for social audit, we are talking about CCTV are used to control the movement of worker. Okay, so for example, if you have enough so-called working experience as a social auditor, some of you may hear that in some big country, I don't want to mention the name. Their enhancement of the security is even until the not say security, the enhancement of the worker discipline, even as straight as how many minutes you go to toilet, they need to monitor you. Okay, so if you use more than this amount of time, you go to restroom, and result the production is not meeting the youth, then they will have a warning letter or they have some disciplinary action to the worker. These are the area that under the concern of a social auditor. So if the CCTV matter is, we are still looking at what is the purpose of that CCTV. Okay, if the purpose of that CCTV is to control the goods and to ensure the security, yes, fair enough. But if they are using to control the worker movement, for example, when we refer to a few disciplinary cases, so the CCTV is quoted as evidence, and then we will try to investigate. Okay, the CCTV are quoted as evidence because they are so happen the CCTV are projected at the location or is purposely projected at the location to control the movement of the worker. So there are some the side evidence that we can use. For example, we can check the disciplinary record. So is that all disciplinary record are using CCTV as evidence to discipline the worker, or is only coincident? So this is also become a subjective question. But then auditor must learn from their experience and from the feedback of the worker, whether they feel like CCTV are purposely put there to control our movement, rather than like what you said is a requirement of the customer. So that's why we said this is very subjective. And when this is subjective, we need auditor that have experience and also independent to conduct the audit. If this is not subjective question, a robot can conduct the audit, because the robot only indicate what area we can put CCTV, what area we cannot put CCTV. But there isn't any such requirement to tell you what are the area that we cannot put CCTV, what are the area we can put CCTV. It's subjective for the auditor to make judgment in every different audit. I hope this answer can be accepted, because it is also a subjective answer to you, I think.
Can I add on regarding
yeah,
the
please,
CCTV?
Amajit,
In USA, the requirement is from the same agency that have blocked their the Malaysian goods, and also who want to make sure the containers going into USA is secured. It can go in a faster lane.
Yes, I think
we call it city pack audits.
Yeah, there's also another audit. Yeah.
So I think you are right. Is the aim of the CCTV? Is it for security and safety, or is it for monitoring the workers? Like going to toilet, that's very right. But one of the important thing a social auditor should look whether the subject matter, the worker have been informed that there's a CCTV monitoring them, because this is required by Malaysian law and even other laws. Personal Data Protection Act requires that. That in case there's a CCTV installed, the person being monitored must be informed. So this, it can be a non-conformity.
Yeah, they cannot hide the CCTV. This is correct. I think in personal data protection. So if you install CCTV, you should inform the person working at the area. Yeah, I agree with, about this. May I know any other related question to this case study? So we can share among ourselves. So we could have a brainstorming, and we may learn from each other.
There are several questions, Mr. Tan.
Yeah, can you please select one or two that you feel interesting to share?
There is a question, who is to investigate? So you mentioned that there is a need to investigate after your audit. We are to investigate issues raised by the auditor. If we are to investigate issues raised by the auditor, are the personnel you interview reported in your, sorry, maybe you should rephrase Mr. Ong.
I understand what Mr. Ong, let me try to tell my answer. Okay, if there is an area that raised by the worker having concern by the auditor, who should perform the investigation after the auditor have completed the audit, but the case is still remain as unresolved because it's only a grievances, right? Okay, so this is very much depend on the nature of the issue raised, the grievances raised by the so-called the worker. Normally, grievances related to welfare, we will ask the employer investigate themselves. For example, there was mentioned, for example, the so-called the normally what are the case? Yeah. Normally, let's say some of the worker giving grievances is like, okay, we normally have attendant allowance, but then if on that month I have medical leave, so this attendance allowance will be like not entitlement for me, but I cannot control if I have sickness, is it? So their grievances is it's not fair to have this. So these are the mechanism related to worker welfare. We will normally ask the employer to investigate themselves. But in other hand, if the issue is related to the criminal, like sexual harassment, like just now the bribery to union member, that we will not ask the employer to investigate because this is biased. Okay, we must understand if issue concerning like bribery, like sexual harassment, okay, we will potentially ask the independent so-called investigation, or sometime we will report it not inside our report, but also in some cases we will report to the customer or the accreditation. Like for example, let's say if we perform SEDEX audit, we have another so-called sensitive information report that we will report back, and then the accreditation will take the action whether to have further conduct an unannounced audit to investigate the case. So I hope my understanding to this question is correct. Next question, please, just to save some time.
Also about the related question to CCTV, I think that if the hostel, for worker safety, the hostel sets the time for workers to return, sort of a curfew, with exceptions where separate arrangements for outside time can be set upon the request. Would this also be considered against freedom of movement? If there is a curfew, there is a time when the workers should return to the hostel.
Yes and no. Okay. Let's put an easy answer to the yes first. If the worker movement is being controlled during non-working hour, this is forced labor. Okay. In our employment contract, let's say we have to work 8 hours to a specific responsibility. Of course, we have to stay in the factory and work according to our contract. If I am an operator, I should operate the machine. So in that 8 hours, according to my contract, I should work at the machine or my workplace 8 hours, because that is the contract that I have signed. Okay, but after the working hours, let's say if I stay in hostel, I stay in my dormitory, I should have my right to go outside to meet my friend or to buy grocery. Yes, you shouldn't able to stop me. But then sometimes there is dormitory rules or so-called regulation for the worker to follow. Many of the third party, let's talk about the more professional dormitory management. So nowadays, there are many third-party dormitory management that offer dormitory service to many big organizations, so that the big organization do not need to rent houses for the worker. They can just send the worker to the dormitory. Okay, some dormitory will need access card to enter and go up. Okay, so they can have record of the worker, how many stay there. In terms of emergency, they will know the head count, for example, fire. So that is to record the number of worker in the building. Also, that is not control the security, the movement of the worker. But then, if the rules and regulation is to control, okay, after 10 o'clock, you cannot go up. Okay, that will be an issue. Okay, but they're only taking the attendance is fair enough, because there could be the requirement of the safety and health. Just in case of there's fire, they know the head count. Another situation is during the MCO, movement control order in Malaysia. Take it as an example. I noticed in Johor or in Penang, there are some town council giving out an instruction or order to the dormitory that worker cannot go out after 10 o'clock. If this is restricted by law during the MCO or darurat situation, yes, we have to follow the law. Other than that, that is considered as potential movement control. So we need to advise the employer that they have no right to do so during the worker non-working hour. Okay, I think that is my answer for the question. Maybe we can have another last question for this case study number 2 before we move to case study number 3.
Mr. Robert has been holding the hand, so I think maybe if Robert, if you have something relevant to the case study.
Robert, if you're still here, can you please voice up if you have any question?
Yes, Tan. I think,
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Thank you. Please.
It's an interesting topic. However, there's one key thing actually needs to be actually looked at. We are
Okay.
talking about all those CCTVs and all those controls itself.
Mm-hmm.
You has been in the auditing field for a long time, I know that. How do you look into the stakeholders' engagement for such cases bound to happen, especially of those CCTVs or whatever those restriction control, before you actually make any decision on how to go about that, whether there is actually a slavery down there or there is actually a forced labor down there, or you can conduct any interviews in this aspect. Because for me, I'm looking at it, the stakeholders consultation is very important, that whether the owners or the employer has actually have a proper stakeholders consultation with the workers on the respective way of actually they're having, why they need to have this CCTV, why they need to put these things and all these things before we come to a judgment call whether they have violated those issues. This is only my comment. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Robert. Yeah, stakeholder consultation, another important factor that's bring into today's topic. Yeah. In general, when auditor go to the field to perform audit, one of our agenda is to have a stakeholder consultation, and sometimes there could have some feedback based on the minute recorded or based on the direct interview, that some area will be a stakeholder concern. Okay, we do not auditor usually do not issue any issue in our report if we get some input from stakeholder consultation. Any so-called finding related to stakeholder consultation, we will need to further verify with adequate objective evidence to show that that concern is a valid concern. Other than that, we will only raise up as a issue of concern. So issue of concern is not a direct finding that the organization have to take immediate action. But then if we issue as a finding, then the issue have to take immediate action. So that's why, as an auditor or any investigator, if the issue of concern have been raised, if we don't have evidence to show that that issue of concern is a very valid issue, then we will not issue a finding. For example, let's say they have a concern of CCTV, okay, installed at the guard post and at the warehouse. So there was feeling uncomfortable when every time we walk in, we see the CCTV projected to us or things like that. So they are very much concerned on what if we are doing something there and the people outside the office is monitoring us, and I feel very much uncomfortable with this issue. Okay, so we must also go on the field and look at what the actual situation is. And the concern sometimes is only a sentimental so-called feeling. And if there is no any breach of, let's say, controlling the worker, then we have not enough evidence to issue a finding. For example, let's say they are installing a CCTV at the smoking area. So those workers smoking at the smoking area feel like we don't like that, because I don't know, when I go to smoking, these people in the office are looking at us or not. So I always feel very uncomfortable if I want to go to smoke. So I hope they don't install a CCTV in the smoking area. So this is a valid concern. And then we also want to know why you need to install a CCTV in a smoking area. Okay, so is that related to the security, related to the safety, or related to the goods, or you want to control? You want to see how many people are smoking at the smoking area, which is it's not supposed to be a concern, that how many people are smoking at the smoking area. So upon clarification with the management or with the person responsible for safety, they say, oh, we always want to install this CCTV at the smoking area because there is a high risk that could be possible have fire situation. So sometimes it's better when we install a CCTV cover also the smoking area. In case there is a fire, we can notify, and then this is the reason why we want to install a CCTV. So auditor have to, based on the feedback from different party, and to make a final conclusion to issue as a finding. Okay. So
I think there is a miss thing here, Tan. My question is actually on what you raised, something about the workers or whatever. So you as an auditor, what sort of feedback do you give back to the workers and to the employers that the purpose of this CCTV being installed is for what purpose? Are these purpose or objective have been discuss with the workers on the purpose rather than the workers feeling insecure, feeling this, feeling that. So that's a key point in some of the audit to be conducted in that manner, not just that actually that it's a one-way traffic. So the question goes back to have proper consultation being given to the workers that the purpose of this CCTV, the purpose of that, the purpose of this, before actually we talk about the next thing. If all these purposes are not being discussed with the workers, then it's risk to something of the TIP or a forced labor or whatever those issues. This is the point behind it. Right? I agree that actually what you say is you do this, but it's not a question of using a finding or whatever. The question is actually is that have the workers been properly been informed? Thank you.
Yeah, I like what Mr. Amarjit Singh informed under the personal data protection. So installation of CCTV at the workplace or at the area where worker or employee are working, they must inform to the area that the employee are working. So that's why I'm not aware of the your question that have that been informed to the worker. So that is a very direct question. I think we have to just ask. But then it's not the auditor to tell the worker the purpose of the CCTV. So auditor is only to verify whether they have done this.
Of course, it's not the auditor to go and tell the workers. The auditor is to actually to check into information. Have the workers been informed of this? That is the key point, you see. Thank you.
That is one of the initial question that before any question raised, the auditor should ask has the worker being informed, and then but I did not discuss about this because I jumped to the further stage where the CCTV are being used to monitor or not. That's why I have misjudged your question from the first step whether the auditor have asked the purpose of the CCTV is being shared or informed to the employee or not. I mean, yeah, you are right. This is the very first question that we should ask. Okay, shall we continue with the case study number 3?
Yes, Mr. Tan, we have, it's 10:48 and we have only 12 minutes left. So before Mr. Supun takes over, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, our case study number 3 is refer to the situation in Malaysia where glove maker WRP to reimburse recruitment fees paid by the worker. Okay, this is not something very new. It was reported in July also 2020, almost 1.5 years ago. Okay. Some of you, if you are from the glove factory, I think you understand the situation. For those who are not, let's refresh. Okay, the key report statement here is foreign workers are regularly forced to pay agent exorbitant recruitment fees to find jobs in sector of domestic care in Malaysia. Okay, and another important statement here is I paid around 120,000 Nepalese rupees, around 4,280 to an agent to get to Malaysia. And this is not enough to repair that in full, one WRP worker told FMT, okay? And also, a statement said that last week payment are in stark contrast to the negative headline created in January 2019 when staged a 3-day strike after claiming they have not been paid their salary for 3 months. Okay, worker did not receive their salary for 3 months, but that is happened far away in year 2019. A subsequent investigation by the Labour Department found that WRP was guilty of withholding worker overtime wages, making unfair pay cuts, and working during breaks or public holiday. Okay, this is all indication of forced labor. Okay, the sign of forced labor here is migrant worker requests additional work for more income to pay debt. It could be a sign of worker paying agency to get job. Okay, when you look at the worker, they work day and night and they work so hard, they always want to get more salary and they tell you not enough money to pay the debt. So we can follow the trail and check whether this is a sign of forced labor because they pay the agency to get the job. Okay, worker pay slip indicate suspicious deduction. In some case, it could be indication that migrant workers are paying recruitment fees. For example, deduction to medical checkup fees, training fees at migrant worker country, passport or visa fees. If this deduction have been made, there could be an indication that forced labor are happening. Worker salary are paid with cash. A sign of salary pay not traceable could lead to forced labor indication. For example, salary not paid on time, unreasonable deduction. Okay, so if investigator or auditor, you see this kind of sign, you may follow the trial to continue investigate or audit because that could be a sign of forced labor. So some recommendation to the trafficking in person during this social audit is review recruitment agency contract with the company. This is to check if there is reasonable charges to cover recruitment of migrant worker. So this is very important. If we go to a company and when we carry out the audit, okay, when we notice that an agency company in the source country, for example, we are sourcing worker from Nepal, Bangladesh, or Myanmar, and they only charge USD $50 per head to get a worker to come to Malaysia. Do you think that is fair to cover their service or charges to recruit a migrant worker to your company? So that would be a big question mark. So a company, if they are only using a low-cost agency or sometimes even free of charges, in my experience, I did look at a contract agency worker contract who serve Malaysia company. They are giving up their service free of charge. Okay, they did not collect any money from the Malaysia company to recruit a foreign migrant worker to Malaysia. So that kind of contract or that kind of services will consider a very high risk service because most likely they will get their money from the worker. So it is impossible to give us free service or very low charges like $50 US dollar to recruit a migrant worker because they need to go to different places to recruit migrant worker. They need to help them to transport them from their village to the city. They need to pay them some fees for accommodation or for their food before they can transfer them to the employer country. So these are all charges that the agency, the sourcing agency need to pay. And if they are only charging lower service fees to the Malaysia company or the employer company, that will be a good indication that auditors should check how they earn their money. Are they taking money from the worker? So this is very important. And investigator and auditor shall interview with migrant worker to obtain information of pay recruitment fees. Verify the information against data obtained from the contract. For example, what is the name of the recruitment agency and what are their bank account number? If they are charging recruitment fees with the worker, they have high chances that some of the money are transferred through bank. So if we have this record of information or the bank detail they have, we might able to also see some potential evidence that they are charging recruitment fees from the worker. And review wages record with evidence of pay wages to confirm wages paid to the worker. So some of the agency company would ask the first month or second month salary to pay to their account. Okay, so that means agency company are also asking money from the worker from their first or second month salary to pay to them as recruitment fees. So that is also why the wages record have to be verified or reviewed, especially the first and second month the wages record of the worker, especially migrant worker, because this recruitment fees always happen in those companies who recruit migrant worker. Sometimes the company who recruited the migrant worker may not be the problem. Sometimes the problem always occur that from the agency company in the source country that help the company to recruit to source for migrant worker. Okay, any question from case study number 3? Maybe you have a quick one for to answer 1 or 2 questions.
Yeah, looking through it, Mr. Tan.
Yeah, can you please?
Can employer charge hostel rental, utilities, COVID-19 test kits from workers?
Okay, the easy answer for COVID test is no. That is the law of Malaysia. Accommodation, our law only limited employer to charge a maximum of 50 ringgit for accommodation. Hotel and utilities bill like water and electricity, I understand they can charge based on the usage, but not overcharge to the worker. But most of the company in Malaysia, when I conduct the audit, they actually give them free until certain limit of the usage. Okay, this is my answer. Any others question?
How about the visa renewing cost? Doesn't it go under forced labor as well? Should the company pay it or the worker?
Yes, it's the company pay. The principle of social audit is there is always zero recruitment fees. So zero recruitment fees mean even transport, visa, or the air ticket back to the source country, or all these have to pay by the employer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's continue with case study number 4. We can answer if there is some other question, we can answer later. That's the last case study. Last case study is we are taking a case study from Japan. Okay, this is also in year 2020, reported in year 2020. Okay, Guns wasn't the only one trapped in Malaysia. Guns is the very famous person, the Nissan boss, who bring back Nissan to the automotive industry. Okay, but there are many cases that he don't end up in a good reputation in Japan. Okay, many foreign workers also want to escape. Okay, why they want to escape? Let's see the article. We have a color from the article. The fact that the company keeps the employee passport in their custody and make them work correspondent to forced labor, which is not allowed in Japanese law. Lawyer Soichi Ibusuki said at a news conference Thursday at the Foreign Correspondent Club of Japan. Okay, the news reported not the case of the Nissan boss, but it reported many foreigners want to run away. Many migrant workers in Japan want to run away because they have problem of their employer holding their passport. Okay, let's go further with some article screen cut. Okay, the other important article here is she surrendered her passport, college transcript and college diploma so that the company could process her visa application. She signed a form in Japanese that she said she did not understand, giving her employer the right to keep the document indefinitely, even if she quit working there. Okay, another article to the same incident is, after a month at the company, she discovered she was being paid only 100,000 yen a month, less than he needed to live on. When she asked to leave and for the return of her passport, the company said, it is returned to you. If it is returned to you, then you are going to run away, she recounted. Okay, very, I mean, do you feel something very similar in Malaysia? I think many years back, it is like custody in Japan. Normally, when a company recruited migrant worker, it is like a norm that will keep their passport. Okay, but I don't think now Malaysia company will do this. Okay, the sign of forced labor here in this case study is migrant worker cannot present passport when requested during audit. It's a sign that migrant worker is not in control of his or her own passport. Okay, very important. When you perform an audit, you perform investigation, when you enter the location, the workplace, it's just ask a question. Mr. Migrant Worker ABC, can you show me your passport? I want to know whether your name, your visa is whether valid or not. If this worker can immediately show her passport to you, it shows that the passport is always with him. So that will reduce any risk of employer holding the passport. If at the time you ask the passport, the worker don't know how to react to you, they will tell you, sorry sir, I don't bring my passport during work, I keep it in my hostel. Sorry sir, you need to hold on for a while, I need to go to office and take the passport to you. And this kind of answer is posted to you, then you should have some sign of passport is not under the control of by the worker. Okay. No secure storage place provided to migrant worker, forcing migrant worker request employer to keep their passport. It is very logic if we ask a migrant worker whether you keep your passport with you all the time or not. Most of the worker will tell you, no, I couldn't keep it all the time because I'm working on the field. I need to collect palm oil every day, and I will lose my passport. I will damage my passport easily, so I don't bring the passport with me. But then, where did you keep your passport? I got no choice. I have to ask my employer to keep for me because I feel not safe to keep inside my dormitory. I feel not safe to keep inside my lunch box. Okay, so if there is no facility for the worker to safekeeping their passport in their dormitory or at their workplace with maybe a locker, that could be also an indicator the employer try to use this method to keep the passport of the foreign worker or the migrant worker. And the third one, migrant worker cannot explain the consent letter that allow employer to keep their passport. My very first information to you is, even though there is a consent letter, nowadays we don't accept consent letter anymore from the worker, migrant worker, to the employer to ask them to keep the passport. Consent letter is only acceptable for the worker to write to the employer to ask them to use their passport to apply for extension of working visa, for the extension of passport for the documentation purpose of this kind of visa extension. Other than that, not acceptable for them to keep the passport every day or all the time. Migrant workers don't know their right and the procedure to request employer to return their passport. Okay. So migrant workers are not trained or briefed or informed that control their own passport is their right. So they even don't know how they can get back their passport. Let's say if the employer keep their passport. These are all the signs of forced labor. Okay. So we also some tips on on-site verification. Check when migrant worker keep their passport, ensure the passport is under the control of the passport owner. So this is very straightforward. Ask the migrant worker and ask the migrant worker bring the auditor to the location that keep their passport to see whether it's safe or not, or they actually need to request a passport from another officer who keep their passport. So this is very important. Just follow the migrant worker and check where they keep their passport, or that is through a control of another officer in the company. If there is a consent letter, verify whether migrant worker sign and understand the consent letter. Okay, so consent letter, as I mentioned just now, is only accepted to allow the employer to use a passport for the extension of the visa or application of a certain needed document. Last one is review living standard of the workplace location, take consideration of the accommodation, food expenses, and transport, ensure the wages meet living standard as claimed by the migrant worker. Okay, so just now the incident, the case study was mentioned. The pay of the migrant worker was not enough to make a living in the country. So auditor have to review the living standard. Very important is whether the accommodation, the rental fees, the food expenses, and the transport is enough for the wages to cover all these expenses, accommodation, food expenses, and transport. Okay, so if not enough to cover the expenses, or it's just enough to cover the expenses and they don't have extra money, then why the migrant worker have to work at another country? Because they cannot earn any money to for them to send back to their family. Okay, these are all the case study we can share today. So let's go a fast one to open up for the question. Like we can share or brainstorm what we can do better if we have a case of retention of identity documents. Can I see any question from the audience?
There is a question about the employment contracts, if it should be in the worker's native language or not, Mr. Tan?
Yes. Okay, when we talk about worker, we are there to protect the worker, and normally when worker in that situation, their education is low, so they normally cannot understand too many language. Okay, so normally, not normally, it's a requirement that this kind of requirement or document must be in the language that the worker understand, and at least in their nationality language.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a straightforward answer.
Okay, I think Dr. Karma, Savita, do we have any more time for the questions? Or
okay, yeah, any important question? If you have a very important question, you can just voice up now, or else I would like to say
5 minutes maximum.
Yeah,
perhaps 5 minutes maximum. Yeah, Mr. Tan, thank you so much.
Yep. So, yeah, please.
If no one wants to voice it, then there is a question from Mr. Amarjit. Can a migrant worker leave a company by giving due notice? In case of migrant worker, employer must provide traveling expenses to leave for their own country.
Yes, I want to answer. Yes, the employer must give any fees, even though the flight ticket back to the country. This is a requirement. There shouldn't be like the worker have to pay their flight ticket. This is the part of the question. And there must be an employment contract with the migrant worker stated the termination clause. Okay, either party can termination the employment. That should be fall under a fair recruitment. Okay, so we need to refer back to the contract of the employment with the migrant worker, because recruitment of migrant worker, according to procedure, there should have a demand letter to apply for the recruitment of the migrant worker. The demand letter shall detail with all these requirements like wages, working hours, this working visa expenses in the employer country when during the work, and also the termination. Okay, normally there should be a clause of the termination. If there isn't any cause of termination, auditor can issue a finding, because that did not give a clear choice of the migrant worker under what circumstances he can terminate the so-called the employment.
Yeah, Mr. Tan, can I add?
Yeah, please, Mr. Amarjit.
Okay, actually, when there's nothing written on what giving due notice, you have to follow the Employment Act. Mm-hmm. And Employment Act says if it's less than 2 years is employment, you can have to give a notice of 4 weeks. Don't just follow that. You cannot say it's written in the contract that you have to stay here for 2 years. So follow the Employment Act, the terms and conditions. So which favor the worker, that applies, Employment Act. So if the worker come here after one week, they say want to leave, the employers should accept the resignation and provide all the expenses to the worker, migrant worker, to go back. If not, it's forced labor. They cannot say you sign a contract for 2 years, you have to work for 2 years. Okay.
Yeah. So that's why there must be a clause of termination that the worker would understand under what is the termination procedure.
Even the termination procedure is written, must give 2 months notice, or after 2 years only you can leave. But that does not apply because paragraph 7 of Employment Act say that the terms which are better, whether in Employment Act or in the contract, to the worker, that applies. So follow the Employment Act.
Yeah, Employment Act said if there is no contract, there will follow 2 years is 4 weeks. If there is a contract, we will need to follow the contract.
No, not follow the contract. Under paragraph 6 of Employment Act 1954, it said that if the contract, the terms and condition is worse than the Employment Act, follow the Employment Act. The part of the contract is null and void. So this is very clear in Employment Act in Malaysia.
Yeah, that we will subject for the industry lawyer to interpret.
No, no need industry lawyer. The auditor must know that.
Okay, let's carry on. Another question?
Yeah. How about workers that have deduction of wages, especially if they are hired by working or recruitment agencies? Workers' salary deducted at certain amount for certain period of time until all their fees and costs and whatever is due paid. Is this condition regarded as a forced labor?
Totally not acceptable if the deduction of is not a lawful deduction. Lawful deduction is, for example, their social insurance or those stated by the law. If there isn't any lawful deduction, it's totally unacceptable.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think we'll have to wrap up. There was one comment, I guess we'll leave at this note. Why does the speaker think that migrant workers have low level of education? Philippines and India workers could have a university degree. That's a discrimination.
Yeah. When we say migrant worker is not professional worker in my definition here, so they are recruited for a general daily work, but not engaged at the level of the professional migrant worker. So I think I did not make myself clear just now. I apologize for that. Actually, there's 2 levels of migrant worker in every country. When you want to apply as a migrant worker for general works, that will fall under the general worker level. And there is also another type of professional worker. They are recruited as an engineer, researcher for a company, which is under the high skill or high level of migrant worker. So my apologize for the statement just now. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just a understanding. I think, Mr. Tan, thank you so much. I think we will have to wrap it up here. Dr. Karma, if you are ready to step in.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Karma. Please wrap up.
Julia. Thank you so much, Mr. Tan. A very interesting session.
Thank you.
So we will have a 10-minute break and then we will invite our second speaker, Mr. Supun. So participants, we can have a breather for 10 minutes, toilet break, get a quick snack, and then we will come back here at 11:25. And also, Mr. Supun, if you are ready, can you please stand by 11:25, where we will start the session 5 minutes earlier. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for the rich session. Thank you.
See you short while. Yeah, bye.
See you.
Thank you, Mr. Tan. Hello, everyone. Welcome back from the break. Can you hear me and can you see the screen?
Yes, Dr. Karma.
Okay, thank you so much, Savita. We would like to welcome our second speaker, Mr. Supun Nigamuni, to give his next sharing. So please allow me to read our second speaker's profile. So Mr. Supun is an accomplished forestry and environmental specialist with experience in compliance auditing, training, certification, program management, and environmental assessments. He heads the management team of Control Union Malaysia and is responsible for managing certifications for Control Union Malaysia, a global leader in sustainability assurance in agriculture industry and many other sectors. Formerly responsible in managing the FSC, Forest Stewardship Council, Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil RSPO, Energy Management Systems ISO 50001, certification activities for Control Union certification worldwide, and also environmental services for the Asian region, which provides sustainability solutions for products, entities, and activities in providing sustainability reporting verification, life cycle assessments, environmental footprints, carbon neutral certification. He's a very senior auditor having international auditing experience in forest management, chain of custody, RSPO, principles and criteria, SCC, ISO 14001, ISO 50001, greenhouse gas assessments, ESG assurance, and other environmental and social programs across many sectors. Mr. Supun is a keen follower of sustainability trends and is interested in assisting organizations to achieve their sustainability ambitions. We're very, very honored to have you, Mr. Supun. Thank you so much for coming and presenting and also agreeing to our request for auditor sharing from Control Union. So please take the floor, Mr. Supun. The floor is all yours. I'll stop sharing now. Thank you so much. Mr. Supun,
can you hear me, Dr. Karma?
your volume is not very very good.
Just
Can yeah. I can't seem to hear at all at the moment. Perhaps there's maybe the microphone is a little bit far.
How is it now? Is it better now?
Yes, much better, much better.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Karma, and thank you very much for the DEEP project and also the Nottingham University for organizing this event and also inviting us to actually share our experiences, which is a matter pertaining not only for Control Union, basically for the entire auditing community and also the clients and all the stakeholders related to all the industries in Malaysia. So thank you very much for that.
You're most welcome, Mr. Supun. Mr. Supun, can I request a little more clarity in terms of audio? The microphone is 50% at the 50% volume level.
Is it? Or let me try my best.
Okay, now it's better. Perhaps it's from my side. So can I just request a testing, please, before we proceed?
Yeah, I think I can hear Mr. Supun pretty well.
Some of the participants have also requested for more clarity, so I just wanted to be doubly sure before I interrupt. I do not want to interrupt Mr. Supun again. Your mic is muted, Mr. Supun. Your mic is muted, Mr. Supun. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, you have to unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect. Perfect. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay.
Please proceed. Thanks.
Sorry for that. Actually, with the new norm, everyone is actually facing the same situations, even though how many webinars, meetings that we have done. Sometimes we all have to refresh. But anyway, I'm sorry for the apologies for the small technical issues, but I think you all can hear me and then we can actually proceed with interesting dialogue. So, because I see from the previous discussions what Tan was having with the audience, what we can see is actually there's a very experienced setup, a group of people who's actually looking into social auditing and stuff. So I think we can actually make it very interactive. What I'm trying to do today is actually to discuss on a very important aspect when it comes to auditing, which is actually reporting the non-conformities. So reporting, Tan was discussing in detail on how to detect non-conformity. So detecting is actually just one part, but if you can't communicate that non-conformities in the right spirit, the ambitions, the aspirations in identifying those non-conformities may go in waste. So it's very important how to report these non-conformities. So we will discuss on certain challenges what the auditors are generally facing in terms of determining and writing a proper non-conformity, especially in the terms of social context. And also, one of the very important things is auditor can actually write non-conformities beautifully. It needs to be understood by the auditee because it's a requirement that the auditee needs to agree to those non-conformities, and we will discuss what happens if the auditee does not agree to the non-conformities and what are the provisions which are available for the auditor's disposal. And one of the most important things is why we actually do audits. When we do audits, the purpose is actually to find conformers, and purpose is for the companies to continually improve in terms of what they're doing. So in that sense, non-conformities are actually directions that the companies need to do in terms to improve their systems. So it's very important that in terms of the settling of the non-conformities and likewise that you do a proper root cause analysis from the client side. There's nothing to do with the auditor. This is on to the side of the auditee, and what auditors should actually look into settling these non-conformities to ensure the non-conformities that is identified are effectively settled. So as I explained before, I would like to touch upon the basics and the concepts and also discuss through certain cases, and we will try to make it interactive as much as possible. Before getting into the topic, just to give a brief introduction about Control Union. So Control Union was established in 1920. So we have already surpassed 100 years of existence with the awarding of Royal Charter from the King of Netherlands. And at the moment, we are in more than 5,000 countries, 5,000 people spread across more than 80 countries. Providing various services from certifications to commodity inspections to collateral service and industrial inspections across a very broad frame of markets from biofuels, biomass, agriculture, food and feed, fats and oils, minerals, forestry, and tourism, etc. So we basically work with various sectors, mainly looking to how to manage the risks across various supply and commodity supply chains. So when it comes to palm oil, because one of the key focused areas in this particular training session is looking into the palm oil scenario, as well as rubber. So in palm oil, we consider ourselves as a global leader in palm oil certification and assurance. So we are one of the very few certification bodies who have credentials across all main palm oil programs which are available, and we offer a one-stop shop for all palm industry assurance programs from oil to biomass to feed to biofuels. So one of the key questions is why there are so many labels. So when it comes to certification, one of the very key important things what we need to understand is each of the label carries, it looks into one aspect or multiple aspects. So at the moment, there are very limited programs which is actually providing the complete scope of aspects across the entire value chain. So that is why there's a lot of standards, a lot of eco labels which are available because it carries different requirements in the aspirations of the buyers, in the aspirations of the industry stakeholders. So in addition, in RSPO, likewise, we service more than 1,000 companies across the world. We are the world's largest certification body for RSPO with our 2 accreditations in Malaysia as well as in Netherlands. In addition to that, MSPO, Rainforest Alliance, POIG, Palm Oil Innovation Group, likewise. In addition to that, we also work with various brands in assuring their traceability, verification of their no deforestation, peat exploitation commitments. We also provide a third-party assurance against ESG risk assessments as well. So when it comes to social standards, there are various social standards other than what I just mentioned about RSPO, MSPO, and likewise. So what is very popular in Malaysia is like SMETA, SEDEX, ethical trading audits. But there are various schemes available for various industries, like for fisheries. There's a new standard on responsible fisheries vessel standard, because the fishing industry is one of the key industries which is coming into the limelight, that is having a high level of forced labor and human trafficking aspects. So you may ask, why if a program like RSPO, we can't demonstrate social compliance in palm chain? So RSPO is actually a product label. So when it's a product label, it carries, if you see the product, it says that the origin of this material is meeting these requirements, and across the value chain, what we're talking about traceability of that particular commodity originated from that particular area, which is actually meeting the requirements of what we are looking for. But when it comes to supply chain, the supply chain enters from the palm oil, after the palm oil mill, the refineries, to the downstream oleochemical plants, and likewise, RSPO, MSPO, it talks about traceability. In certain cases, health and safety. So in the supply chain component, it does not talk about the social and labor compliance requirements. So that is why there are emergence in the supply chain. Companies are more and more using these social governance setups, in addition to the RSPOs and MSPO certification programs, to demonstrate that they are meeting the high levels of social compliance. So the same situation happens in forestry in terms of rubber. Likewise, when you talk on natural rubber, so FSC and GPSNR is also developing new setups to demonstrate sustainability at the origin level. But even in the supply chain level, you still have this issue that the supply chain standards does not essentially cover the social requirements. So that is why there is at the moment additional requirement, especially for downstream and midstream companies, to get themselves certified against higher levels of social compliance requirements to demonstrate their social and sustainability credentials. Coming into the topic, before we actually go into how to formulate the nonconformities and how to address those nonconformities, let's look into the basics just to revive ourselves, even though you have actually gone through the setups time and time after being experienced auditors. So why do we need audits? To fill, it can be to fulfill contractual obligations, to assess clients against set of requirements, to be, okay, is it just to complete a checklist and to write a report, to issue a certificate, or just that my boss pays me to get an audit done? But in essence, the audits is actually to provide confidence and to assure to all interested parties that either the product, the process, or the service, depends on what the standard aims to achieve, fulfills a set of specified requirements, or that the organization has implemented a system for management of a relevant aspect of its activities. So the value of certification is the degree of confidence and trust that is established by an impartial and a competent demonstration of fulfillment of special requirements, specified requirements by a third party. So we as auditors, we are conducting audits, second party as well as third party. In generally, when you're third party, there are generally the scheme owners, there are generally the auditees, the companies. So we as a third party looking into all the independence, impartiality requirements, which are non-bound in the sense to give a favorable opinion either to the scheme or either to the auditee. So that ensures that the independence, impartiality is actually kept, and the findings are delivered with a level of confidence that can be trusted by anybody who sees the labels, sees the certificates. So it means that it's essential how we perform our audits and register our findings, not only negative, but also positive. I'll touch upon why we need to reinforce, to write the positive feedbacks. And also it provides confidence in fulfillment of a requirement. And we have to be trustworthy and more importantly to be competent. So that's why if you take all certification programs, depends on the program, each of the program has its own requirements, how the auditor's credentials should actually be maintained. And we need to be impartial and basically to all interested parties. What is a nonconformity? So a finding of nonconformity must be recorded against a specific requirement. What we call auditor criteria, can be criteria or it can be indicators, depends on the standards, contain a clear statement of the nonconformity and identify in detail the objective evidence on which the nonconformity is based. So we will look into these key phrases, what I just explained. What is actually audit evidence? So audit evidence is actually what you gather, records, statements or facts or the information which are relevant to the audit criteria and more importantly, verifiable. So it needs to be verified by you. It needs to be verifiable by whoever, the next auditor who's coming in or any stakeholders coming in, it needs to be verifiable. So audit criteria are a set of policies, procedures, requirements used as a reference against which the audit evidence is compared. We all know about objective evidence, but this is actually the very crucial essence in recording a nonconformity and registering a nonconformity, that the evidence are based on facts, not opinions. So how do we make it objective evidence like what we do in our normal auditing setups, through documentation, through records, through observations, through interviews. So when we triangulate these, this becomes facts without just referring to something based on the documents, referring to something based on observation, referring to something based on interviews. If we can get 2 or more sources in, then it actually adds value to what we are trying to state. So then it increases the objectivity of the evidence. And as I explained to you, it's very important when you raise an nonconformity that the auditee understands, auditee agrees. So it's very important when the evidence is actually objective, then in most cases, you will be able to convey the message without any confrontation or any arguments. So therefore, a nonconformity is if the standard says something, if the criteria says something, if the company is not is deviating from the requirements of the standard, the requirements of the audit criteria, that we call a nonconformity. It needs to be clearly described, and again, it needs to be on verifiable facts, not opinions, what we call objective evidence. So let's look into different accreditation norms. So as certification programs, the certification programs has its own requirement. Certification programs are generally governed by accreditation. So accreditation also has its own requirements. So if you take certifications as a whole, we can divide into 2 broad categorizations. One is mandatory versus voluntary, or the other one is actually product versus systems certification. So ISO 17065 is actually the descriptive accreditation requirements when it comes to product systems. When you come to product certifications, ISO 7065 does not distinguish between the grades of the nonconformity. It is in fact requiring whether a product either complies or it does not. So that is why generally, if you see in all supply chain audits, it's a yes or a no, and it's generally a major nonconformity, and there's very less opportunity to classify the nonconformity. Depends on the severity, and likewise because it carries a particular specific requirement what the product needs to carry. So if it does not carry, the product fails. So in those cases, the auditors may decide whether to continue the audit, the reduce the scope, to suspend, the withdraw certification based on sustained nonconformities. But in most cases, 17065 has a lot of relation to systems management systems requirements, which is 17021. As a result, most of the standards are not using ISO 705, even though those are product standards. Specifically, it has overarching requirements combining itself with certain aspects of ISO 17021. When it comes to reference of ISO 17021, it clearly differentiates between what constitutes a major nonconformity and what constitutes a minor nonconformity. So major nonconformity is generally which affects the capability of the management systems to achieve the intended results. So it could be classified as major if there's significant doubt, if the presence, if it is not there, and so it's fundamental, it's repeated in the sense it creates doubts that the effective process control is not in place. And also a cumulative effect of minor nonconformities can also result in major nonconformity, especially in the case that can be the cumulative effect. So when it comes to FSC requirements, we can accumulate nonconformities under a criterion level. Under each criteria, there are many indicators. So we can look into the cumulative impact, or it can be the same requirement issued in a systematic way, in repeated nature, in audit after audit, the same requirement gets flagged, even though corrective action has been provided and the corrective action has actually been successfully settled by the relevant company as well as the auditors. So minor nonconformity is generally the nonconformity that does not affect the capability of the management systems to achieve the objective intended results. So in MSPO terms, we generally follow the ISO 706, 721 requirements. When it comes to RSPO terms, RSPO has predefined nonconformities, which is critical as well as non-critical. So in MSPO terms, the auditors generally can weigh in their professional terms, ideologies, and grade the nonconformities based on the severity and the definitions. In RSPO, even though how small is the issue, if the indicator is cleared as at a critical level, so then we are pushed as auditors to grade those nonconformities as major critical nonconformities. We will also take some reference from SMETA, the non-compliance guidance from SMETA. So in SMETA, unless specifically instructed, the auditors do not create non-compliances during the audit. However, it is recommended that criticality is visible, and the SEDEC stakeholder forum has actually come up with certain definitions what auditors can actually use in determining grading these nonconformities. So one of the key things is actually business critical non-conformance. So it's a critical breach of a code item or local lawsuit resulting in issues presented in critical imminent risk of worker safety, critical risk of life, and it constitutes a breach of workers' human rights. This may either be new business or ongoing business likewise. So it can be a critical nonconformity that has not been addressed over the time. So it becomes business critical nonconformity. And there are critical nonconformities which are severe breaches, which represents danger to the workers, so on and so on. So there are certain requirements from fraud to coercion, to deception, to interference, deliberate damage in brand reputation. It can be the systematic failures, what we discussed, or it can be major non-compliances that has not been addressed. So then SMETA even goes further, even to subdivide it to major non-conformance as well as minor non-conformance. So as you saw, in many cases, the grading of non-conformities is as per what is provided by the scheme. So it is very different from scheme to scheme. So it's very important that as auditors, you are very aware. I know most of you auditors are actually conducting various audits under social program. Every program has its own requirements. So it's very important that we stick to the rules, stick by the book, that what we need to actually evaluate during the time of the audit. And but most importantly, that it's not unambiguous. So it means that if your interpretation as the auditor comes into play. So that is why, as an auditor, you really need to know what you are looking at, and whether you are knowledgeable and whether you are informed to make a judgment in terms of grading that particular nonconformity. So one of the key recommendations is follow the grading suggested by the scheme owner as closely as much as possible. Now let's look into some cases what may go wrong when in defining the NC. One of the things that the auditors generally go wrong is actually when it comes to the clause. So when it comes to the clause, there are several cases that we have observed, even though our continuous training when we engage with auditors, where it is raised against the incorrect clause. So generally when it's raised against the incorrect clause, it affects the validity of the nonconformity. Sometimes you will end up in the closing meetings having certain confrontations from the clients or the consultants of the clients, whoever actually presents that referring, okay, this is not related to this particular clause. So the clause referred sometimes can be too generic level, because if we take a sequence of the clauses, generally if you take FSC or if you take RSP or MSPO, so it looks into different levels. So in certain cases, most of the cases, if you take a general topic, the sequence of the clause, let's say 8.1, 8.2, 8.3, 8.4, most of the cases it starts with whether the company is having policies, procedures, and so then it actually gets into the level of work instructions. Then it gets level into the implementation, and then it get to the level of monitoring. So it's very important that you select the right indicator to actually grade the particular nonconformity. Otherwise, you may steer the client towards a completely wrong direction towards identifying a root cause. So this is very important thing the auditors needs to take note when grading nonconformities. And also, one of the key things is what is on the description, what you write as the nonconformity. So the description of the NC, I have seen still auditors actually writing the NCs just as a negative version of the clause. So, okay, the clause says that you should do this or that, and the NC says the client is not doing that. So you still don't give in your description what is wrong. So you need to actually be very accurate. That also implies to your professionalism as an auditor. It reflects your knowledge. So you need to describe why you constitute that particular matter as a breach of the standard and why this results in an nonconformity. So, so the description of the NC needs to give the sufficient details. It is again, it needs to be clear what is wrong. And sometimes the auditors want to make it very clear. So very clear, then sometimes they overdo. So they write the descriptions very detailed, so sometimes half a page detailed nonconformity or even more, which leads clients towards solving the details of the NC, not towards finding the root causes of the actual problem. So this is very important. You have to write in the right essence and the context, which clearly demonstrate what is where does the company lapse, where is the breach of the standard has happened. So it's very important that you write it in the proper way in terms of a description. So we can also go wrong in evidence. So in most of the cases, what happens is that the description is just a negative clause. So the description just says, okay, it's not following the requirements what is stipulated in the standard. So in that sense, the auditors try to give more and more and more examples, evidence, which needs to be part of the NC description under the evidence. So so these things actually leads to wrong solutions and also removes the supposed evidence, because this is now the description. So you have to be very clear what needs to go under the description, what needs to go under the evidence, to ensure that the NC is not invalidated. So sometimes also the sentences, how you write, it can be even at the OFI level, opportunities for improvement. So OFIs are early stages of the problem that does not constitute deviation from the requirement of the standard. So in that, sometimes when you write the OFI, it sounds like that you are not following a particular set of requirements. So that means it's a non-conformity. So it all comes down to explaining, writing what you feel, what you need to communicate in constituting an non-conformity. And you need to be very specific to write it in objectively without giving indication that there are some personal biasness, that you can't demonstrate that this is objective evidence that you have actually come across in creating this non-conformity. And another very important thing when you're writing evidence is the evidence needs to be verifiable. So verifiable in the sense, okay, next time another auditor goes, or if the client wants to check what really was the auditor trying to achieve in giving this NC, so this needs to be verifiable. So in social cases, we normally come across a lot of issues that are confidential in nature that we can't disclose to the company. So in that sense, as an auditor, you have to be very tactful to not to give confidence to the interviewee. In the same time, respecting that confidentiality in terms of writing the NC, but also writing the NC in a way that it clearly demonstrates that this is actually the problem. So in the general case, we see a lot of cases when we as auditors, we do a lot of stakeholder consultations, we do a lot of interviews with the workers and likewise. So there are, when normally when you start interview, you explain the confidentiality, that the information will actually be confidential. So you're giving the opportunity for them to basically declare whether they want this to be confidential or not. There can be always cases that the auditee, the interviewee declares certain things in confidence. So how are you bringing that particular element into objective evidence? So that is a very critical part when formulating non-conformities. So what I do generally as an auditor is I actually bring that. I don't explain to the client, okay, what went wrong, but I look for cases. So these are red flags. So these are generally what we get into when we're triangulating. If this is only referring to interviews, these can be allegations. So we don't know how the people are actually motivated. So you as the auditor, it's your responsibility to ensure that this particular thing is a fact. So then one of the key things that you can do is you can broaden the sample. If there's a particular concern on forced labor or likewise, you understand who else can actually fit to the sample, do a broad investigation into the assessment, and as a result of the broad investigation, you can make an allegation to a fact. So that's a very important thing when it comes to when it comes to auditor, how the auditor is actually formulating the particular non-conformity. So and also sometimes the auditors basically use examples instead of actually evidence. So but you need to be detailed and explicit, otherwise it's not verifiable. Okay, sometimes you say, okay, maintenance is bad, I saw broken this, that, I saw this. Okay, it needs to mention, okay, which one, where was it, what was broken. So basically you narrow it down. So then auditees cannot come back to you and say, hey, this is not on my side, this was not there. So it's very important, even when you're traveling from site to a site, okay, you highlighted one housing area to be witnessed, but on the way, okay, there are other housing areas as well along the way. So you make a stop, have a look, verify, broaden the sample if there's a need, but make it very specific. So, the confidential nature of the particular issue can actually be generalized. So in the sense that it can be publicly disclosed to the client management as well, that this is happened. But sometimes they will keep on asking, hey, who's the worker? Who's the worker? Okay, we need to verify who's the worker. But as an auditor, if you have made your commitment to the interviewee that, okay, this is actually in confidence. So, and you did your own due diligence to make it a broader sample as much as possible to make the allegation to a fact, then you can clearly say, hey, I have interviewed these 10 workers, and out of these 10 workers, 6 of them is actually sharing the same grievances. And we check this particular set of documents, we check this particular set of records, we interview these additional stakeholders to ensure that this is actually an issue. So sometimes in audit, you may get into diverging opinions in terms of legal interpretations, like the previous presentation. Also, there were certain cases that was actually discussed in detail. So in those cases, you may need to broaden always to ensure that you are telling the right thing. Because the last thing that you want is the auditee coming back and saying, hey, you have interpreted the legal requirements incorrectly. As a result, the MC is nullified. Yes, there can be instances that you need to take a step back and to reevaluate what you're actually finding. So that is why it's very important that the communication between the auditor and the auditee is very clear. And don't get into early conclusions on anything. Do your own due diligence. Give the opportunity for the client to basically come back to you with their set of explanations in a way of a wash-up, in a way of a pre-closing meeting, and likewise, so you get their viewpoint, you get their side of the opinion before you go into the ultimatum of the closing meeting. So generally, closing meeting, you have to try your level best to reduce the conflicts likewise, but it does not say that if you are firm on certain thing, you still have to present them. But you need to basically cover your ground to ensure that this is in fact in line with the standard. This is in line with the work that you're supposed to do, and this is a fact. So that is very important when you are an auditor and the evidence, when the evidence are verifiable. So the corrective action, everything, the root cause analysis, everything can actually be derived accordingly if you do a proper job. So then, how to present an NC? I have been telling previously as well. When you come to presenting nonconformity, it's, I told you, the auditee needs to agree. So, you are the person who has actually been to the site. You are the person who's making the decision. End of the day, lead auditor, if you take RSP audit team, so it can come from one of your audit team, but it is your responsibility, end of the day, as the person who chairs the session, to take the final judgment, whether this is a yes or no, whether this constitutes a nonconformity, or whether it needs to be downgraded to OFI, if the OFI needs to be a nonconformity, whether my auditors recorded the positive findings correctly, whether those positive findings, they have missed certain things which result in nonconformity, which can result in nonconformity. So it's very important as a lead auditor, there's a bigger responsibility for you in terms of the entire objective, achieving the entire objective of the audits. So you have to be very clever. in using your knowledge, in using your skill, to choose the level of detail, how you want to address the NC against, and thus prompting the client on a certain direction of solving the NC. So you don't, as auditors, we need to be independent, impartial. It is not our responsibility to actually find the root cause. We need, but when you raise a non-conformity, you will know what the direction is. But that is their work. What we will say is, okay, this is where you are. This is where the standard requires to be, and this is the gap. That is what you essentially write down in MC. How to go from here to here, that is a responsibility of the company. One of the very key things is we discussed about non-conformities. Would like to touch upon positive findings as well. So positive findings, it needs to be recorded in a similar way as a negative finding. Because in a positive finding, you're giving it a tick. So when you're giving it a tick, you need to ensure that under a particular indicator, under a particular clause, there can be 10 different things. So if you're coming to a positive judgment by verifying 2 of those things, that is not correct. So then it can even lead to non-conformity if basically if you look into the whole process of those 10 subsections of the indicator that you needed to ensure. So it's very important that you write the positive findings in the same spirit, in the same level of confidence that you were writing the negative findings, the opportunities for improvement. So also specify the evidence in a way that is traceable, verifiable by third parties. So even though someone who was not available during the audit should know how the item was covered. So in all certification bodies, especially when it deals with accreditation, one of the key important things is the reports which are finalized by the auditors. It's not final. It then goes into internal technical review in most cases, and in RSPO and MSPO terms, especially in the main assessments, in FSC, also main assessments or reassessments, it even goes to external peer review. That is to ensure that the auditors looked into the scope correctly, they constitute the positive findings correctly, they constitute the negative findings correctly, and whether the process what is required from the standard was followed. So this is very important to write it in the way, and also the certifier review, the technical review is very important when it comes to authenticating the process. So what can go wrong is that certifier can't come back to you and say, oh, this should have actually been non-conformity. So asking auditor to raise an non-conformity. It is your responsibility end of the day, because you are the one who has been on site. It is your call to demonstrate whether it's a non-conformity or not. But the certification decision-making process of the technical review process can prompt you to raise additional findings, to prompt you to actually go back to reevaluate the particular process. So that is to ensure that the process is actually foolproof, and whatever the lapses are actually being captured, and we are not ended up in a way that some media outlet picks up, saying that, okay, this certification body conducted this assessment and was not able to find these particular issues due to the fact that the auditors did not look into this carefully. So, so it's very important. So certifier can prompt you to actually rethink, but end of the day, it's your decision. But in the technical review, sometimes the audit can be nullified, and it can be requested to actually conduct additional reviews to ensure if a particular area is not captured properly. But as an auditor, so that's why you need to really manage your time, really manage what we have looked for, what additional things you need to do. If it's a multi-day audit, basically to go step by step to ensure that everything was actually covered in the right spirit. So you don't end up in those areas, and you don't write a report by just copy pasting from another report. So that is actually impacting your credibility. So as an auditor, you're there to do a job. It's your responsibility to do it in the best interest the best spirit, and it's the responsibility of the certification body to provide you necessary time, sufficient time to come to your particular conclusions. But in the same time, so what we generally say to our auditors is that we have, from our side, from controlling side, we have clear requirements, sometimes even going beyond the scheme. So we are giving the option to the auditors. So, okay, the time is of essence. So sometimes you are being squashed for time, your vehicle broke, or there can be a lot of unavoidable circumstances. So in that case, your only objective is to ensure that the scope of the evaluation is covered. So if we are not able to cover the scope of the evaluation within the given time, we have given tools to our auditors to extend the time or discuss with the client and come back. So the audit cannot close until the particular scope is actually being covered. So I presume that all certification bodies have similar frameworks to actually address. So these are very important things when you're actually conducting an audit. So I think there are some questions. Let me pick the questions myself. If anybody wants to, from the discussion, from my thoughts, if anybody wants to add their professional experience, please be good enough to unmute yourselves and actually speak up. Otherwise, I'll just go through the questions. Okay.
I'm Amarjit Singh. Can I ask some question? You did mention that the standards will tell us whether it's a major NC or minor NC. But most of the time, social audit, if you are keeping workers possible, it's a major NC or critical NC. Yeah. So I think there's no need for a scheme manager like RSPO, MSPO to mention that it's major or minor, because it's very clear what is major, minor, because we have experience like some companies, they have RSPO, principal criteria certificate. I think your company was involved in that. And then there was videos going around that they are doing forced labor and all kind of things, remember? Yeah. So the major is a major. So I also would like to ask you from your point of view, if there are certain things that they are the estates are doing, which is under forced labor, do you have to look into the standard and see whether it's forced labor or not? Because one requirement to write an NC is that there must be a requirement. But as in Malaysia, there is no standard which clearly define what the requirement is for forced labor, whether it's RSPO, because when you say it's a requirement, it shall be, the word shall be used, the word, not verb. Shall be used, that means it's mandatory, or that the organization might comply. But we don't have such standard for palm oil industry or even normal industry. So the question is major, minor, because your speaker earlier, Mr. Tan, said that you just write an audit report. To me, no, you have to issue NC, because then the organization will know this thing we are not doing right. They have to have continual improvement. They should improve on it. So what is your opinion of that, whether requirements should be clearly stated in the standards, or you should auditor assume what is the requirement?
Yeah, it was a very good question, Mr. Amarjit. So basically, I'm actually from the background of forestry. So I'm very much used to actually auditing FSC, which is actually the gold standard and the mother standard of all sustainability standards. So being used to auditing as per FSC for many years, I still believe that, okay, sometimes RSPO, the predefining of the NCs does not reflect sometimes the situation. And so I believe personally, it should be actually given to the auditor to determine whether this constitutes a major nonconformity or minor nonconformity. But so that's why I said, different standards gives different requirements. So if I, as I explained to you, SMETA requirements are very clear. If it's a breach of threatening the worker's safety, a breach of code, and likewise, it's generally a major or a critical or even at a higher level. When it comes to MSPO, For an example, it refers to ISO 17021 requirements. So when it comes to ISO 17021 requirements, we'll have to look into the definitions of the ISO 17021, the definition of what constitutes a major nonconformity, what constitutes a minor nonconformity, and then formulate your NCs accordingly. As auditors, you can't be given from your personal opinion. You always need to actually follow what specific requirement that you need to look into. But of course, I agree with you 100%. There are cases like the safety concerns, like the forced labor concerns, likewise, and it can be even 1 or 2 people from a company of 300, 400 people. But if the case is very clear, and if the extent of the issue can actually be larger, because you are not just looking into the nonconformity on the surface. When there's an allegation, you have to look into the facts. You have to get that allegation to a fact. So if that goes through a process. So if you feel that the extent of the issue is actually much larger, then definitely you use your professional opinion in actually grading that as a nonconformity. That will basically safeguard your credibility, as well as the company's credibility, as well as the scheme's credibility. So it's actually of everyone's interests to ensure that you look into it in the proper spirit. But there can be always questions. Okay, that 2 employees that who had these kinds of situations. But when you look in further investigation, you see, okay, company has clear procedures. Company has proper work instructions in place. In 98% of the time, they have actually done it, but there is a temporary lapse in terms of the situation. You ask the question, why this happened? So you can basically understand the entire background of the situation. And there can be certain times that you can actually grade that as a minor nonconformity. So it all comes down to the situations. There's no one requirement stating, okay, if it is an indication of forced labor, this definitely has to be a major. Unless the scheme specifies, it should not be that way. You, as the auditor, you need to dictate. You need to understand how big is the situation, whether this actually creates a fundamental failure in achieving the objectives of the standard and the requirements, and based your judgment according to that. But more often or less, what we instruct our auditors is actually, especially the social situations, even more than the environmental situation, you have to be very, very, very thorough in your evaluations, and likewise, and a lot of effort is actually being done with regards to auditors to improve the situations, and likewise. And sometimes you can see when you go for an audit, okay, you can already see a pay particle, okay, on forced labor or likewise happening to a particular company. But when we go and evaluate that particular company, we'll have to look into the scope. What does the scope constitute? So when you talk about RSPO, the scope is actually the mill and the supply base. In MSPO, the estates are separate, the mills are separate. So we can't address it at the top managerial level unless the scheme determines, like in RSP, you have the multiple management unit requirements. So it's not just this unit, but basically overall. So you need to basically look into your scope, audit scope, look into the objective, what the standard says, what are the provisions you have at your disposal, and actually work accordingly. I hope I answer your question, Mr. Anarjit. And okay, there are a few more questions. Can the auditor mention the name of the worker in a nonconformity? I already answered that. So generally in S8000 requirements, in SMETA requirements, and generally in social audits, we don't specifically mention a particular worker if this work, the reason for the mentioning of the worker is actually based on the interview, because it's very important we give confidence to the interviewee to actually discuss the particular matters with us. In most of the cases, these are very confidential cases. So in that sense, that's why I said, broaden your sample, get more names into your sample, and then that actually becomes facts. And that basically can be presented to the clients as objective evidence, so which will not threaten the confidence that you already established with your interview. Girija has actually a very long question. Maybe Girija, if you are online, if you can quickly state your question, so then we can better understand.
Yeah, I think just summarize a little bit from there. I think most of the companies have this question, thinking that different auditors have different interpretation. The standards may be similar, but when they, being audited by different auditors, why is it the outcome is different?
Yeah, or it's a very important one. A very important one. It's a very common problem as well.
So that actually gives a lot of issues with the companies. Absolutely. In terms of at the current situation with the manufacturers, because all of us follow a similar standard, but when it comes to the outcome, it's different. So that raised a lot of question whether it's the standard or is it the auditors.
It's a very important question. Let me phrase it in this way. As I explained to you, there is no because the standard does not explicitly say, okay, how you need to actually write a non-conformity. So professional opinion of the auditor plays a big role in terms of writing a non-conformity. So in those situations, a very senior auditor will look into it in a more broader way, using all this experience over the last 10, 15 years, compared with an auditor which is actually just starting his career and likewise, because experience, like in any other sector, matters a lot when it comes to actually audits. So there can always be cases, there's some person is actually looking into it very detailed, while the other auditor is just looking at it at the surface, which can create diverging opinions in the industry. Hey, my auditor is actually a bit lenient. Okay, my guy is actually tougher. Okay, I don't want this auditor. I want this auditor, so it's easier for me. So those things happen in the industry. So those are certain cases where, as certification bodies, we take tireless efforts to control those situations from happening. So how we can actually control those situations from happening is in the proper sign-off process of a particular auditor. So if it takes meta audits for a requirement, so if you want to be a meta RA auditor now, under APSCA RA auditor, you need to actually have 50 audit days. So it needs to have sufficient experience. So in terms of RSPO is a bit more lenient. Okay, you're talking about 15 days. In MSP also, you're talking about 15 days. So the 50-day auditor will definitely carry more weight than auditor who has actually gone for 15 days of joint audits with another auditor. But still, the sign-off process is actually one that is very important for all auditing certification bodies to look into. It's not just a business. It's a business that you need to give confidence. So it's very important that your employees, your auditors have the right tools to likewise, so to understand a particular situation. So that's why harmonizations and shadow audits, the witness audits, are very important in terms of upgrading these particular cases. So for us, basically we are having harmonization every quarterly basis, every half a year basis, annual basis. So we have at different levels, we get together, we discuss these critical matters, and if it is a matter that is addressing, reflecting a particular situation with a company that we do more sites, we do 15, 20 sites, okay, then it's very important that we harmonize what a certain auditor observed across the others in a very swift way. So then everybody is actually up to the same level. But yes, so certain sites will be with us, certain sites will be XYZCB. So there can be always in difference of opinion based on the professional requirements of the auditors. So that is why it's very important that the certification bodies harmonize and develop their policies, procedures accordingly to upgrade the levels of experience what the auditors have. Okay.
Can I add, because this question was a nice question. She asked about whether smoking, about smoking. Some, they say you're very good, your company is good, let the workers smoke. The other, from safety point of view, occupation safety and health, is very bad. I think if I'm the auditor, I would say smoking is not the right of the worker, or taking drugs is not the right of workers. So you need not provide a smoking place for workers. That's one of the things you ask. And especially sometimes the workers want to bring handphone to their workplace. It's not their right. Yeah, handphone, they are supposed to come to work, you are paid to do work, not to answer call. Another one you ask is whether HR staff can assist workers to withdraw money. This is a problem in palm oil industry, especially they are very far away from towns. There is no banks. To go to a bank will take about 10 hours or more than 10 hours. Then they may ask HR staff to withdraw money. My advice is do not withdraw money for the workers, because why? Then there's a element of what do you call it? There's some element of what do you call it? I can't get the right word. So it's better not to keep an ATM card of the worker and withdraw cash for the workers. Of course, there's another issue whether in far away distant places, can you give them cash or you want to bank in the money? So there's a different issue altogether.
Yeah,
okay,
I think Mr. Amarjit, yes, to a certain extent you're right. So that's where I'm coming from. What seems right to you may not be right to the next person that is, you know, coming in to audit. You see, like you say, no, smoking is not the right of the worker. But when you look at it, it's the next person that comes and says that okay, why do you restrict? It's not you know, you provide a safe a space, like, you know, when you see at the airport, and you don't restrict somebody, but you provide a space to, you know, to accommodate your workers. You know, you practically you don't restrict. So that's where these are examples. It's just examples where I'm coming from. Like, what seems right for one auditor, when you go for the next surveillance audit or the next audit, it's wrong for the next. You know, it seems wrong when you know, for the next auditor. So why is it not tally for all the auditors to, you know, come for the same result or same, you know, it's confusing for the companies. One auditor is saying something,
exactly.
Other auditor is saying,
So experience is very important, hands-on experience. So a new auditor may think this is a very good thing. This, like the workers are coming, they are not going to airport or where you make a personal decision. This is coming to work. They get paid to do work. Yeah. So this is social system. You say they come to work. When they are working, you should pay them their money. Yeah. So that's very important. That means I think our friend, he explained very clearly that experience, hands-on experience is very important. Yes, sir. If you use a consultant or trainer, they should have hands-on experience, not reading from something.
I think a more training for auditors is you know, to have a uniform interpretation. I think it's very, very important. It saves a lot of trouble for the companies.
Yeah, we call it calibration. Calibration auditors.
If you may excuse, I think also in the respect of time, it's a very interesting discussion. I think definitely as auditors we go on this in discussing on these issues. So the scheme owners also plays a very important role in terms of providing clear interpretation. So even in RSPO we have the interpretation forum. So when the matters of recruitment fees, this particular case, what I'm actually referring to, actually came up. So we had big discussions with RSPO where CBs discussed their opinions, and then it actually the interpretations were made firm. This is what we actually call recruitment fees. Likewise, so then it is not only applicable for auditors within control union, but it's applicable for all auditors who needs to actually be auditing. So schemes plays a very important role in basically in harmonizing and standardizing how a particular requirement actually needs to be interpreted across the industry. So since we are only up to a certain, we are just completing the first part. The second part also needs to be completed. So in the view of the time, let me just quickly go through. I'll leave this case to you. for you to, this is a very common case for you to raise the non-conformity and the objective evidence from what we actually discussed earlier. Let me just quickly go through to the root cause assessment part, the next phase. Okay, now we are now moving from the client to auditee. So when it comes to an auditee, when you give an unconformity as an auditor, what does the auditee needs to do in addressing an unconformity? So what are the auditors looking for? So auditors are looking to actually seek clear demonstration that the client understands how and why a problem happened in the first place. Auditor needs to know what they have done to correct anything that needs to be corrected, and how the client ensures that this will actually work better in the future, and the corrective actions that you have taken is effective. So this is essentially what the auditors are looking for in settling the non-conformities. So there are several elements which is applicable for all non-conformities. Doesn't matter what is the scheme, it matters. So one of the key thing is where you start is actually with the root cause analysis. So root cause analysis, you can break it down into two. One is actually root cause, why, and also look into extent analysis, whether this is actually only here or whether this is happening throughout the organization, whether this is isolated case or whether this is more. So it's very important to actually do a root cause analysis. So you just don't just look into the root cause, okay, and just putting a plaster on top of it, but understanding whether this actually problem happens in the other parts of your body, and what actually is the action. Yeah. Then another element is correction and also corrective and preventive actions. So let's just go into these parts, how you can better understand this. Okay, what is the root cause? Okay, take the simple tree. Take a medical diagnostic, for example. Okay, you may have a sore throat or a blocked nose. Okay, the obvious cause for your discomfort are the sore throat and the blocked nose. But even if you fix those two, but you will still have the flu because you have not addressed the underlying situation, the underlying issue. So the problem actually keeps coming back. So that is why it's very important to do a proper root cause analysis in terms of settling non-conformities. So the arts root cause analysis also needs you to consider the extent of the problem, as I explained to you before. Has the non-conformity situation occurred elsewhere as well? Specifically, you need to also check what has the client done to check this particular matter. Okay, this is not just these two cases that we encountered. Are there more? They have to do the investigation to figure out, okay, is this the one recruitment agency I'm talking about, whether the same applies to all. And we will see how this root cause analysis can be done. But before going to that, let's look into correction. What is a correction? Correction is generally the quick fix. So making correction involves correcting the specific instance which was identified in the NC. What is corrective or preventive action? Corrective or preventive action in ASI terms, Accreditation Standards International, they only use the term corrective action. In generally use corrective action, which is the form that you take the correction, and also the preventive action. So different schemes have different interpretation. What is it? But the general idea is correction is what you do to fix it. Corrective preventive action is to ensure that this particular situation does not happen again. So, so in urgent cases, as auditors, you can request for action plans with justification why the client believes that this particular corrective actions that you're proposing can fix the situation. But in terms of settling an unconformity, it's very important that you ensure that the corrective actions has been implemented effectively. What you mean by effective is that has ensured that that particular situation will not happen again if you basically conduct through the implementation of this corrective action. So this is very, very important. So let's just quickly look into some steps of how to actually do a proper root cause analysis. And some of you may be actually Buddhist, but I'm just taking a Buddhist philosophy. The oldest mentioning of this particular approach actually comes 2,600 years back in the Four Noble Truths, where Buddha was discussing dukkha, samudaya, nirodha, and magga. So the truth of suffering, the origin of the suffering, and the truth of ending the suffering, and the path that you need to take to end the suffering. So this is actually one of the very first written examples of a proper root cause analysis. But when you when you come to the level of kaizens, when you come to the level of other continual improvement tools, fishbone diagrams and 5 whys methods, and likewise those also setups explains clearly what needs to be done in actually identifying proper root cause analysis. So the first thing you need to do is you need to define the problem. So this problem is generally can be constituted from what the auditors are actually stating in the non-conformity. So sometimes in social cases, it's very hard to take immediate correction. It takes time. But in general terms, if you can take immediate correction, take the immediate correction. When you're doing the root cause analysis, you can use a fishbone analysis to identify what causes this, what are the primary causes, what are the secondary causes. So then basically you understand a certain level of possibilities, and then you eradicate certain possibilities in determining what really went wrong, what really resulted in this particular situation. And 5 whys, some of the experts argue that this is overkill. So 5 whys means that you have to ask the question why 5 times. So if you say, okay, there's an accident, okay, you ask why the accident happened. Okay, then you can say, okay, this worker did not follow the requirements. Okay, then you can ask the why again. Why did the worker did not follow the requirements? Okay, maybe because he was not properly educated. So then you ask the question why again. Why wasn't he actually properly educated? Or company did not have this in the training plan. Okay, why did the company did not have it in the training plan? Okay, because the person responsible ignored it. Okay, why the person ignored that particular? It was not in the company's procedure to include that particular function. So that particular thing, if you ask this question, why, you don't need to do the 5 whys. You can even do 6 whys. You can do two whys. Depends on the particular situation. But there's a very nice approach in determining why this problem happened. It's very important for you to understand this in coming up with corrective actions. So once you do the root cause analysis, understand the extent of issue, then you come with corrective actions, and then you come with preventive actions. So what I normally do to my auditors is ask them to actually, when they're settling, ask them to go through these 5 sets, 5 questions, so then they know that the company has effectively settled this particular non-conformity. So I explained to you about the fishbone diagrams. I explained to you about the 5 whys. So these are different tools what the companies can actually use in determining what constitutes a good corrective or a preventive action. Most importantly, you can come to proper corrective preventive actions if you understand, identify that the root cause is consistent. If you identify the right root cause, you will take an action which will address the particular situation. If you identify a wrong root cause, you will basically be directing yourself to some other place, and you are on threat that particular issue can actually happen again. So the root cause analysis is the most important thing that the auditors needs to look into in settling non-conformity. So this is the crucial way how to look into it. So when it comes to so correction is normally the immediate fix. Corrective action is the things that you can do to actually correct the situation. Preventive action or corrective action in the frame of Assurance Services International is looking into the root cause. So correction is basically fixing the issue. Corrective or preventive action is actually looking into the root cause to understand, to demonstrate whether the root cause is actually addressed properly. So as a result of the root cause being addressed properly, we are ensuring that this particular problem will not happen. So that is why sometimes when you correspond with the auditors will actually sometimes say the root cause is not sufficient because you are only looking into in the surface. Because it may not just be a matter that, okay, the particular operator has done the thing wrong, but you have to see why the particular operator has done the thing wrong. Who was there to monitor? What was the company's procedure? Are there any improvements needed? So that is why you need to basically bring that into the PDCA cycle, which we talk in Kaizen, we talk in general certification or continual improvement using the plan, do, check and act cycle. So you see where are the problems. Is it at the level of check? Is it at the level of do? Is it at the level of P? Okay, what can be done to improve? So basically, each of the case you analyze, you plan, you implement, you check whether that particular problem has actually been addressed, and you act on it basically to revive, to ensure that
Terus kau no job oh. Kau tidak tahu uncle tu macam mana tu gaya dia. Kalau dia masih tidak mau besok.
Sorry, someone actually is the mic is switched on. If the administrators can mute, that will be great. Yeah. So this is basically the process that you need to take in addressing corrective actions effectively. So this is very, very important. Auditor will do only a part job if you give a good NC, but it's also the auditor's responsibility to ensure, to look into these corrective actions carefully and close these corrective actions to ensure that this situation does not happen again. I know most of the cases, there are some cases that the auditors, okay, there are back-to-back audits, so the NCs needs to be settled, and likewise, okay, sometimes NCs can be settled in a desk review. Some, in certain cases, you will request for follow-up. So generally, social-related concerns, generally, we will do any follow-up audit. So basically, there's sufficient time for auditors given, so they will go on site to check and ensure that this particular situation is handled properly. So giving NC is only part of the job that you're supposed to do. Ensuring that the NCs are addressed properly is very important, because what you're going to do, the purpose of an audit is to ensure continued compliance of a certain set of requirements. So it's very important that both these two stages are of equal importance. Sometimes you will do a fantastic NC, but if you settle it on the surface, the objective of you raising that NC actually is fruitless. So I would just like to end on this particular note to restate how important it is to actually do a proper root cause analysis and to come with effective corrective actions to ensure that these situations does not happen again. So let's just put the learnings into practice, okay? Because there are auditors as well as there are clients. This is actually something that I use in my trainings generally. Okay, not a social issue, but it's an environmental issue. So when you go on a factory visit, you see a tap open. So what will you do as an auditor? You will raise an unconformity to an auditee. So generally, what does the auditee needs to do in handling this particular situation? Or what should they actually do in and what is the sequence that they normally should take in settling the situation? Okay, you walk on a factory floor, you see a tap open. What will you do? If anyone would like to share their thoughts, just for a learning exercise. Anybody? Okay, let me since nobody is actually voicing up, let me just very simply actually put this through, because this is a very easy way to learn the particular concept. Because most important thing as auditors is if your concepts are correct, you have a proper establishment that you can grow upon. So, okay, what's the problem with FP is open? Okay, the second step, immediate correction. What we need to do is, first thing, you have to switch off the tap. You have to switch off from the regulator itself, or if it is actually the pipe is broken or likewise, you disconnect the supply. That's the very first thing that you need to do. Then you look into the root cause. Okay, why this happened? You interview the workers. You can say, okay, what is our procedure? What is our policy on this? Okay, we have a policy on safeguarding water. Okay, what is our procedure? What is our work instructions? Who is there to actually monitor? Is this a matter of maintenance, or this is a matter of use? Okay, where the problem is. So then you actually do the root cause analysis. And okay, root cause analysis, you find out, okay, this can be something to do with monitoring, maintenance. If that is the case, then it has a direct relation to monitoring as well, or whether this is actually a problem with, related to general awareness of the people. So the possible corrective preventive action should be coming up with SOPs, doing more education, because when you are working with people, it's always about education. Doesn't matter that you did a harmonization 3 months back, but if the people has not digested it, because communication, there are two ways. So there's a sender, there's a message, there's a receiver. So the receiver needs to receive the message. So it can be that the harmonizations were not effective. So do it again, doesn't matter. Provide visual signs to ensure that this will actually not happen. So people will see all the time. People will be prompted if, okay, if this remains open, which are the channels I should take to ensure that that this is corrected. So these are very simple example which you can actually understand how you need to approach in actually settling a particular nonconformity. This particular example you can apply to anything, even to a more advanced social issue like the recruitment case that we have actually discussed. Define the problem, immediate correction in social cases. I explained to you, sometimes it is possible, sometimes it is not. And then do a proper root cause analysis, take corrective actions, take preventive action. So you ensure that the problem does not happen again. So I have actually come to the conclusion of my presentation. I think I have timed it well. I have another about 10 minutes basically to walk through if there's any questions. Let me just look into the chat. Okay. There's a question from Ying from Wild Asia. So some of the auditors have raised NCs based on findings from interviews of workers. There is no evidence in terms of documentation or other objective evidence. In these situations, the NC raised considered as valid. As I explained to you, we need to triangulate. We need to do our level-based in terms of triangulate. So triangulate is actually interviews, observations, and documentations. If it's just an interview, it can actually be an allegation. So it's your responsibility as the auditor to make an allegation to a fact. In that sense, sometimes the nonconformity can only be based on an interview, but then it has to actually achieve the general consensus. So for an example, in a recent audit, we found when we discussed with the clients, when we did the stakeholder consultations, all the stakeholders that we asked are saying that they are not aware of most of the stakeholders are saying that they are not aware of the company's grievance resolution mechanism. But there are concrete evidences that sometimes they have actually come and appealed to the company. Company has actually recorded it properly. There's even attendance sheets which are available that the company has actually signed. Company has signed this. There's attendance sheets demonstrating that the interviewees, even the people who said that they were not aware, has signed and acknowledged that they have referred to this particular nonconformity. They have referred to this particular grievance resolution mechanisms of the clients. So in those cases, can an auditor raise it as a nonconformity? Because from the records, what the auditors observe is the client is demonstrating conformity. But the people who are actually saying that they were not informed has even signed in the attendance sheet that they were informed. So in that case, the auditors graded that as an opportunity for improvement. Because yes, you have done the particular exercise, so there's effort from the side of the company, but yes, the stakeholders are still demonstrating that they're a bit concerned. They are not aware of what the company's previous resolution mechanism is. So in that sense, we did not constitute that as an unconformity. We constitute that as an opportunity for improvement. So it's very important when you write the opportunity for improvement, you write it in a way that it demonstrates that that this is not an unconformity, but this is the early stages of the problem, which can result in an unconformity if you continue. Okay, the next question is from Anil. Is there any efforts done by auditing agencies to have more robust training of auditors so there is more uniform interpretations for non-conformance across various industries? I think we discussed that that in detail. So it's mainly harmonization. It's sharing experiences. You learn from experiences. You learn from looking into how a lead auditor interprets a situation. So that's why normally when we are signing off an auditor, we send them to join different lead auditors as much as possible, because normally the auditors will arrive at the same conclusions, but how they arrive, the process that they follow can be different from one another, because it comes down to the experience, the sectoral experience. So if you even don't have sectoral experience, if you have the concepts, the process that you need to do, you can basically arrive at the conclusion. Because in an audit, what you do is show me. Don't go to an audit with the know-how that okay, you know everything. You may know everything, but go with your cup at least half full. Because even for me, even I've been auditing for 10 years, I still learn from each and every audit that I go. So, but if you know the approach, what questions to ask, show me. It's not you're there to actually find conformance. So you're not only there to actually find faults. It's the company's responsibility to demonstrate their conformance. So you may not find any violation, but if they can't demonstrate to you how they do it properly, that means, okay, it may not be an issue now, but that definitely can be an issue in the future. So it's the company's responsibility to demonstrate that we are doing it right. Not that it's your responsibility to demonstrate that you are doing it wrong, that they are doing it wrong. It's their responsibility to demonstrate that they are doing it right. So you make the judgment based on that. So sometimes you may not even find any issue whatsoever. But when you do the interviews, when you look into the company system, and likewise, you see a particular aspect is absent. Okay, no violations at the moment, but that aspect is absent. So still it constitutes an unconformity. So these are very important things that you need to actually look into. Yes, of course, it's based on harmonizations done internally as well as done by the scheme owner. And harmonizations like this PHIR project, which was organized by the Nottingham University with the UK government, these are very important initiatives in actually bringing all the auditors together in sharing their experiences, sharing their wealth of knowledges. So these are the efforts that we need to continue to do, because learning is a never-ending journey. Every day you will actually learn, every day you will actually gather something new. Okay, there's a question from Mr. Ong. Would you accept if a root cause is provided is we did not know that it was required under the standard CHRA or medical surveillance not stated, okay, or overlooked during legal register not updated? So again, so don't accept anything on the surface. Check the approach that the clients have actually used. Check the approach that the clients are going back, asking them why this actually happened. So I think all the CVs encountered this at the very beginning, because in RSPO it's voluntary. People sometimes make a very important effort to actually go in because it's a ceiling, it's very high requirements. So they have to basically take the hard hit. The audit is not the most expensive part, basically getting yourself ready for audit. So we saw when MSQ was actually mandated and likewise at the initial stages, companies were having very difficult in understanding what is actually the issue, what efforts they need to take to actually correct the issues. They were just in the frame of mind, okay, this is negligence, or this is lack of awareness, and likewise, and they do a training, okay, it's done. So if you settle it, you as the auditor, you as the auditing company are the one who will be facing the music next year, because when you go next year, the same problem will be there. So how will you that you settle the particular issue? So in that sense, even for the side of the client, okay, minor actually becomes major. And if you don't do a proper analysis of the particular non-conformity, look into the particular conformance, and on the third surveillance, NC gets recorded because a senior auditor actually went on site. So then it doesn't matter whether it's you or another auditor, you are representing the company. So it's actually the responsibility of the certification body to ensure that all are actually the same level. It's very difficult to achieve, but each and every one of us needs to actually make the effort to ensure that we are at that level. Mistakes happen even with the auditors as we speak, but it's our responsibility to trigger this through technical reviews, through harmonizations, and address this across the organization, because these extent analyses are important not only for the clients, even for us, for anyone. If you have any problem, apply the root cause analysis method so you can actually come out of it with strength. Okay, there's another one from Anil. Given the international focus on social compliance violations in Malaysia, are auditing agencies considering tight timelines for findings of NCs be remedied, or companies face revocation of their compliance status of certificates? There are certain cases, Anil, that the certificates has actually been withdrawn immediately. So certain certification schemes provide certain norms. For an example, in RSPO, more than 5 major nonconformities under a principle will result in an immediate withdrawal. So RSPO has 7 principles. So when you're talking about 7 principles, 5 major entities in a particular principle. So hypothetically speaking, a particular company can have 4 times 7, 28 major entities, and then still keep a valid certificate. So hypothetically speaking, but certification bodies will not do it. So, so that is why it's very important that the initial audits or at the start of the certification cycle, generally the initial audits, not necessarily the recertifications, has to be very firm. So the auditors needs to take extra precaution, especially when you are looking into it main assessments, initial audits. There's a lot of pressure on auditors, because you need to deliver, you need to ensure that you cover the entire conformance. Because surveillance audits is generally easy, because when you go, you have the previous year's checklist, we have the previous year's reports, you know what the state of the company is. But when it comes to main assessments, that's why it's recommended in complex schemes like FSC, you do a pre-assessment. RSPO is now indicating in the new rules, you need to do a pre-assessment. You need to do a stage 1 audit. MSPO, as per ISO 200 requirements, it's also requested to do a stage 1 audit. So at least documentation wise, at least the process wise, you ensure that these matters are being picked up before it goes to the actual audit. Because the last thing that you want is to nullify, you need to come back. So that affects the entire professionalism. But if the auditor needs to take a stance, firm stance, you need to take that stance, because end of the day, it's your reputation as the auditor. It's your reputation as the company, because all the auditors are ambassadors of the company. So if they don't do it properly, it basically jeopardizes the entire objective, what we are trying to achieve in a scheme. So I think...
Supun, my point was in the surveillance audits, I mean, given the situation and the focus we have on Malaysia, isn't it sort of wise for the auditing bodies to be, much tighter in their approach now and say, look, any findings and non-conformances need to be remedied within 60 days, or something tighter, so that there is pressure on the companies as well.
Yes. So for an example, Anil, in most of the schemes, major non-conformities maximum 3 months. So we have had many cases in the recent past where when the auditor thinks this needs urgent attention, the auditor can actually shorten the particular time span. The auditor can take that decision. So we have given those provisions with the provisions of the scheme. When the scheme says maximum, then it gives the ability for the auditors to shorten. We have had many cases that we have shortened the need. We have demanded that these non-conformities cannot be settled by desk audits. These non-conformities needed to actually be visited on site and looked into whether the corrective actions are prompt and action. So yes, definitely there's more scrutiny, because end of the day, it's the whole credibility of the entire industry. Because see what happened with palm, because now the governments are not waiting until because normally if you take any court case, you have to be proven wrong to be penalized. But what CBP is doing, and also with the push from the NGOs and likewise, they are taking decisions even before you are proven wrong. So that is how scrutinize the particular setup is. And it starts with one company, and then the focus is actually on the entire industry, and it goes to the next, it goes to the next, it goes to the next. We experience as at auditing houses basically from when one of our clients actually got flagged. Okay, then the others were already working on those corrective actions because they knew, okay, they are going to be next. So we have to be vigilant. So it matters of social, especially Malaysia is the destination of migrant workers. So it's of essence that you don't look into you in silos. The actions what you're taking can basically impact the entire industry, especially in the circumstances that you don't necessarily need to be waiting until you are proven wrong to be penalized. They are taking the decision already. So good point, Anil. I think so. It's very important that the industries itself works together in improving the situations of the industries. I know the palm oil industry have taken tremendous efforts on that to safeguard their interests. Rubber industry has also done the same, but these efforts needs to continue to ensure that that as a country we are safe. With that, I think almost all the questions are actually answered. With that, I will move on to the organizers. And thank you very much for all the contributions during the sessions. I hope this was actually this was a nice session for you in terms of your learning, and likewise, we all have to improve. So continued improvement also applies to us. With that, I would like to end my session. We are right on time, and over to you, Dr. Karma. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Suhun, for your very elaborate sharing. Thank you so much for giving an overview of the different standards as well as a summary of auditing 101, especially in terms of the formulation of non-conformities and also the root cause analysis. I really appreciate it. It's exactly what we were looking for, and you have directly addressed whatever that we actually intended for this training. So we are very pleased with your sharing and that of your colleague, Mr. Tan, and we hope that we'll be able to see you in future trainings as well. And just for everyone's knowledge, that Mr. Supun has also been diligently attending the trainings, and today he's here as a trainer. So I also would like to thank Mr. Supun for also sharing this and also requesting his own auditors to come for the trainings and supporting this initiative. So I'm on behalf of the University of Nottingham School of Politics, History and International Relations and my project team, I would like to thank you and Mr. Tan once again. Thank you so much for your time and effort, and we'll be in touch with you via email. And as for the other participants, just please give me 1 minute. I would like to also inform you that we have another training, our final training on Friday. By